I'd like to call to order the regular, special formal meeting of the Iowa City City Council for May 29, 2018. Roll call, please.
Botchway.
Here.
Cole.
Here.
Mims.
Here.
Sully. Taylor.
Here.
Thomas.
Here.
Throgmorton.
Here. I'd like to note for the public's knowledge that Mazahir cannot be with us tonight due to circumstances within her family. And I won't go into detail, but we know it's, I don't know how much detail to go into this, but anyhow, her son is having an operation. So I just want to wish her the best and wish her son the best in that operation. All right, so we have a special presentation tonight. That's item 2. And I'd like to welcome Josh Schamberger from Think Iowa City to make a presentation on Run Krandick Marathon. Good evening, Josh.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Just appreciate a couple minutes of your time to really thank you, this City Council, and several folks in particular, which Monica will thank just shortly here, for your support and assistance in the recent first ever Run Krandick Corridor Marathon that took place on April 29th. It was a very successful event. We had originally, this idea of a marathon between the two communities had been around for decades, and it took about 15 years, and we finally got a way to pull it off thanks to really some great support from the county and Highway 965. Believe it or not, that's the only road you can run on to actually get from one community to the other in marathon distance, other than 380, and that wasn't going to happen. So in any case, it was a very successful event. We had a full marathon, a half K, a half marathon, and all the proceeds were split between the two school districts. We originally hoped we'd get maybe 1,000, 1,300 runners. We ended up having over 3,300 registrations. That represented runners from over 30 states, 31 states, and 3 countries came here to run in this marathon. I know the city manager for North Carolina came here with a bunch of people, and it was number 47 on their list. They were trying to do all 50 states. Well, again, I mentioned all the proceeds went to the school districts in Iowa City and Cedar Rapids, and we were really pleased that just this past Monday, a week ago, we were able to contribute over $55,000 to the 2 school districts, which is pretty incredible for a first-year event. Usually you try and break even.
27 each, right? Or
$27,985 each, I think, was the grand total. So obviously being the face kind of Think Iowa City and the CVB for quite a while now, I get a lot of credit, more than I deserve. Monica Nieves is our Director of Special Events and Communications, and has been in that position for several years now, and really took the lead on making this possible. So I wanted to have her say a few words and actually present you with a small token of our appreciation.
Thank you. So I just wanted to point out a few members in Iowa City, community leaders that helped make Run Krandick possible. Jeff Froon was the only city manager to run in the marathon, so he won the city manager trophy. Of course, the Iowa City Council. Julie Seidel Johnson was a committee member and also led a pace group for the half marathon. Captain Troy Kelsey was also a community member and ran the marathon, I believe. Officer Ashton Hayes was a committee member, and she was the lead cyclist for the women's runner in the marathon, so she did it on a bike. And then Officer Trey Bunch won the half marathon and the public safety trophy that we handed out to the Public Safety Committee, and of course the police department. So we couldn't have done it without all of their support and all of your support, so thank you so much. And I have a couple plaques to give you. You want to take them?
I'll have you deliver one to the police department, Jeff. And go ahead and walk up there.
Okay.
Great.
One for the
Thank
city
you.
and this is for the police.
Very cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great job. It was a terrific event. How many people in the room ran? Jeff did. Anybody else? It was a great event, though, and once again, the CVB think Iowa City did a great job. Thanks so much, Josh. Thanks so much. Oh, great. Yeah, super. All right, now item 3, proclamations. The first is Juneteenth, National Freedom Day. I'm very pleased to read this. Whereas Juneteenth, National Freedom Day, celebrates the day of June 19, 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger led Union soldiers into Galveston, Texas, bringing news that the Civil War had ended and that the Emancipation Proclamation declared all slaves to be free. And whereas in Texas and throughout the South, Juneteenth celebrations began on June 19th of each year, consisting of prayer services, inspirational speeches, readings of the Emancipation Proclamation, food, games, and dances. And whereas in 1997, during the 105th U.S. Congress, House Joint Resolution 56 and Senate Joint Resolution 11 were passed, officially recognizing Juneteenth as the Independence Day observance of Americans of African descent. And whereas Juneteenth reflects our community's deep belief in liberty and equality for all individuals, as all benefit from a greater understanding and appreciation of the experiences of others. And whereas Juneteenth commemorates the strength and resolve of African Americans throughout our history and is an opportunity to celebrate African American culture, art, history, and achievement. And whereas the week of June 17 through June 23, 2018 will be celebrated as Freedom Week, concluding with a Juneteenth commemoration on Saturday, June 23 from noon to 5 p.m. in Mercer Park, 2701 Bradford Drive, Iowa City, that will include games, community education on African American history, as well as a health and financial wellness fair. Now, therefore, I, James A. Throgmorton, do hereby recognize June 19, 2018 as Juneteenth National Freedom Day in Iowa City, and would encourage community members to attend the commemoration events being held throughout Freedom Week to recognize this special day. I think someone's here to accept this. Latasha, come on up, please.
Good evening. Thank you so much for the proclamation from the City Council, as well as you all's continued support every year. I brought with me my, you're right here, my community partnership for protecting children assistant. She can talk to you a little bit more about detail, but we're just really grateful. This is our 8th year, and I've had the privilege of doing this for 8 years. So we're excited this week. This year we took it up a notch to do Freedom Week. And so we have a couple different things. If you want to find out more information, we can, Brooke will talk a little bit about it, but you can also find our information at www.icjuneteenth.wordpress.com. That way you can see the different activities. We have youth activities. The city always brings folks down from the fire department. It's hot, so I'm really looking forward to the fire department coming with water games, as well as the police department and other departments will also be represented, as well as other organizations and businesses locally. We'll have a health fair, as well as we will have kids activities and we have entertainment. And if you came last year and you know about the drill team, they are coming back. So if you haven't got a chance to check out the video that's on City Channel 4 from last year's Juneteenth, you will see the amazing drill team of a group of children who come down from Waterloo. They will be back this year performing around 2 o'clock. For people who were like, I missed it, it's 2 o'clock. So they will be here. We're really excited for them to come back, as well as all of the many other amazing talent that we have that day.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Brooke Kimbrough. As Latasha mentioned, I'm an AmeriCorps partner serving Johnson County in the Social Services Department. And so this is my first time being in Iowa City celebrating Juneteenth, so I'm really excited to see how it goes down. But we decided to expand it to a week of festivities as it was explained in the proclamation. And we wanted to start out with a really good event. And so in April, MFA graduate Tamika Cage Conley and Derek Neuro started a project called the Reclamation Workshop at the Englert. I attended it on full scholarship because it was really expensive. And I was like, this is awesome. I know a bunch of students will be really interested in this. How can we expand this to a community? Stayed in the back of my mind, didn't really know what we could do with it. Had the pleasure of introducing the idea to the Juneteenth Planning Committee, ran with it, and that's the first day of Freedom Week. We're going to have the Reclamation Workshop Part 2 so we can engage more aspects of the African identity than Juneteenth normally reaches. Because it is a distinctly African American holiday, we usually don't go out to our really East African community that we have, a large presence in Iowa City. And so what the workshop does is connect people through literature and find ways to connect through a Pan-African identity through, text. The second day, originally we were going to go to the council, but we found out there's not a council meeting. We were going to present a bunch of really great information that was produced for the Sankofa Outreach Connection, Latasha's nonprofit, the Brighter Future Focus Summit that occurred at the end of March. There was a bunch of really great statistics about the kind of differences in income disparities between racial and ethnic minorities just within Johnson County that we thought it was important to advocate for in recognition of this important and political holiday. However, we're moving our event that was originally planned for Thursday to Tuesday, which was held at Sugar Peace in North Liberty, which is going to be a networking event for Black and brown individuals, professionals, to connect with people in their fields throughout the county and wherever else we can get people to come. So people, invite them to come. This is a community event. All of our events are open and free to the public. Wednesday, we're having a panel at the Iowa City Public Library, and it's going to be exploring the theme for Juneteenth this year, which is other mothering. If you're not familiar, which if you're not an academic in African American studies, you're probably not, other mothering was a term coined in the 1990s to describe the separation between families on the plantation and the caring or nurturing for children as a result of their parents being murdered or sold off during slavery. Very brutal system. Children still were children, and they still needed to be nurtured. As a result, other mothering, i.e. the taking care of kids who are not biologically your own offspring, was, born. And so we want to explore that and how it kind of has manifested in the 21st century in the wake of the prison industrial complex, how families are still being torn apart and children still need the kind of rearing that other children need as well, but parents are far away. Perhaps you're in a system for other individual reasons that you're not able to take care of your children. Who can step in your absence? So we're having people within our own community to be on this panel. We're also having Inside Out, the reentry program, to come to be a partner for this. We, as much as possible, we want to connect people with internal resources for these things that are affecting the nation structurally, but seeing about how it affects us locally. So no Thursday event, probably, because we're moving that to Tuesday, as I mentioned. And then Friday is in partnership with Sankofa Outreach Connection. We do the Trailblazers Dinner. I don't know if you've been before, but you should. It's on our event, on the Eventbrite. All you have to do is type in Trailblazer, and it'll pick it up because it's local to, wherever the internet picks up your location. So this dinner kind of just recognizes people in our community who have been trailblazers for activism and different needs for historically kind of marginalized groups. And amazing people from the university, but as well as the community, are often recognized. And next year, I encourage you all to, submit nominations for people to get these awards. Then Saturday is our final event.
Yep. And that is from 12 to 5. So we hope that you are able to attend, and we look forward to seeing you.
Thank you.
Bravo. Thank you. Latasha, Rakimbra.
Oh, you get
to get this.
Prizes. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks so much.
So Latasha, Rakimbra, I'd like to apologize in advance, but Rockney Cole and I won't be able to attend any of those events because we're going on the Civil Rights Tour.
That's all right. It's all in together.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, the next proclamation has to do with Men's Health Month, but I don't think there's anyone here to accept this proclamation. Yeah, I don't see anybody, and we're going to have a pretty long meeting, so I'm going to skip reading this proclamation. And the last proclamation is Pride Month. So Whereas the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender LGBT plus communities across the nation annually celebrate pride in their culture and community in the month of June, and whereas the annual celebration of Pride began as a collective protest for the rights of LGBT plus individuals and communities, and whereas the national tradition of celebrating Pride in June is a tribute to the Stonewall riots of June 1969, which are remembered as the launch of the modern LGBT plus rights movement, and whereas transgender women of color, including Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, were primary instigators of the national fight for LGBT plus rights and often gave their work and lives to the cause. And whereas the City of Iowa City recognizes the many LGBT plus lives that continue to be lost each year in pursuit of living out their authentic identities, and whereas the City of Iowa City welcomes and accepts people of diverse sexual orientations, gender identities, and gender expressions, and is proud to celebrate the contributions and culture of these citizens. And whereas each year Iowa City Pride brings together thousands of LGBT plus people from across Iowa and beyond to celebrate their shared identities and experiences. And whereas Iowa City Pride will be celebrating the city's 48th annual Pride Festival on June 15 through June 17 of 2018. Now, therefore, I, James A. Throgmorton, Mayor of Iowa City, Iowa, do hereby proclaim June 2018 to be Pride Month in Iowa City and encourage community members to help celebrate this special month. So I think there's someone who could accept this proclamation, please. Sean Finn, right? And I don't know, others? Yeah. Good evening.
Thank you for the proclamation, and we're glad to be here. We wanted to share that this is the 48th annual event, and it's growing bigger every year, run by a crew of volunteers, devoted volunteers, 4 of which are here tonight. Sean Finn is here, founder of the University of Iowa Trans Alliance, and Megan Turner, our volunteer coordinator, is here. So we just want to encourage everybody to, and Nolan Peterson is also here in charge of the festival operations on June 16th, which is the big festival. So we just are doing a lot this year to make the festival bigger and better and to serve the broadest array in the community that we possibly can. And we appreciate being here tonight. I'm not sure if Megan would like to say a few words. Okay, so we're working really hard and we appreciate the support. Thank you.
Nice to see you. Yeah. Megan, nice to see you. Sean, good to see you.
See you. Thank you. See you that weekend.
Good to see you.
Oh, hey. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, item 4 is to consider adoption of the consent calendar as presented or amended.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mem, seconded by Botchway. Discussion. Charlie, would you like to address something? Go ahead.
I'm Charlie Eastham, 953 Canton Street in Iowa City. Just wanted to ask a question about item 4D3, which is has to do with improvements to American Legion Road in connection with the opening of new Hoover School. In previous discussions about these road improvements, there was a discussion about making sure that a sidewalk was installed during the construction process on both sides of the road, the north and the south side, so that the students who are living in Sunrise Village and Modern Manor will have a paved access to the school. And I just wanted to ask if the council could assure us that that plan is still in place. Thank you.
It is, as far as I know. Jeff, do you want to elaborate?
That was the direction the council provided. This is simply bringing the consultant on board so those designs can advance.
I would like to mention that item 4E1 sets a July 3 July 3rd, public hearing on a resolution amending the comprehensive plan by adding a section pertaining to affordable housing. So anybody interested in that topic should, show up and speak during the public hearing. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes?
Batchway?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Item 5, community comment. This is for items not on the published agenda. So if anybody would like to address any topic that's not on the published agenda, please feel free to come up and tell us what's on your mind. State your name. Take not more than 5 minutes, please. So would anybody like to speak to us about a particular topic? How about the heat? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. So this is a first. I can't remember the last time. Okay, we'll turn to item 6, planning and zoning matters. Item 6A, rezoning between Burlington and Court Street, Pentacrest Garden Apartments. This is an ordinance conditionally rezoning approximately 3.41 acres from high-density multifamily residential, RM44 zone, to Riverfront Crossings, South Downtown Subdistrict, RFC SD zone, located at 12 East Court Street. I'll open the public hearing.
Bob
Good evening,
Nichols,
Bob.
Senior Planner. The mayor has asked for some further information from staff on this rezoning request, so I will try to provide that. One question was, when was the downtown Riverfront Crossings master plan adopted? And that was adopted in January of 2013. The plan covered downtown, which is on the north on this, or excuse me, on the left on this slide, as well as Riverfront Crossings, basically from Burlington Street to Highway 6, from roughly Gilbert Street to Riverside Drive. One of the goals of adopting this plan was to provide an area of the city where new growth could occur, specifically higher density growth, to take pressure off the historic buildings downtown and the historic neighborhoods located to the east and north of downtown. We followed the adoption of the plan with the adoption of the Riverfront Crossings form-based code. That code has specifications for how the 8 subdistricts within the Riverfront Crossings area should be developed. The plan or the code includes a provision for bonus points for affordable housing, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but this is an excerpt from the plan. And it specifically spoke of this particular property as an area that was suitable for affordable housing at a fairly high density. The plan does include...
Bob, just to clarify, did you mean student housing at high density?
Right, excuse me. Yeah. The plan does set a base height, which it varies throughout the district, but in this particular area, it allows a base height of 8 stories, which means if this zoning is approved, this property, as well as others that are already zoned for the Riverfront Crossing South Downtown District, are allowed to build 8 stories.
Bob, if I could interrupt for just a second, please. So the map you're showing us now is the code, the form-based
Right,
code,
right.
right? It's not the plan, the master
Right.
plan.
This is from the form-based code, and it shows the various sub-districts, and it represents the heights that are allowed by sub-district. For example, in the South Downtown sub-district, 8 stories are allowed. 2 additional bonus floors are allowed to be approved by the Staff Design Review Committee or the Form-Based Code Committee, and up to 5 additional floors may be approved by the council, for a total of 15 within this particular sub-district. So a base of 8 with a maximum of up to 15. Something that I would point out is that the bonus provisions are at the discretion of the city. They're not automatic. If a developer or a person proposes a bonus and they even if they fulfill the requirements of the bonus, it's the city's discretion to approve that bonus on that particular property. To be awarded bonus points, the project must demonstrate excellence in design and a high building quality. Bonus points or bonus floors can be granted for open space or the creation of public parks within the Riverfront Crossings District. They can be granted for historic preservation. For example, the owner of this property, the proposed developer, also owns the Tate Arms property. And when that was designated a landmark, or after it was designated a landmark, they were able to transfer, or they're able to transfer the development that otherwise could have occurred on that property to other properties in the Riverfront Crossings District. Just as an example, in that case, the Tate Arms property is 7,800 square feet. The zone in which it's in allows a 4-story building. So the developer has 31,200 square feet, or 4 times 7,800, that can be transferred. Approximately 7,000 of that was already transferred to the new building just to the north of Tate Arms, leaving approximately 24,000 square feet that could be transferred elsewhere, including the property that's the subject of the proposed rezoning tonight. The bonus provisions may also be granted for public right-of-way. In this particular case, the proposal is to reopen Capitol Street and dedicate right-of-way for that street to the city. That would allow roughly 300,000 square feet of additional floor area that could be added to the buildings on these properties.
Sorry, could you state that amount again, please?
It's 300,000 square feet. Bonus provisions may also be granted for Class A office space, contributions to the Public Art Fund, for LEED certified buildings, for student housing, and that's not just any student housing, it has to be student housing that meets the criteria of the code. It must have professional management and security. It must provide amenities such as usable open space, either indoors or outdoors or a combination of. Bonus points can also be added or achieved through the use of hotel space within a building. For every floor of hotel space, an additional floor of building height may be granted. Bonus points are also available for workforce housing and senior housing. One question was, if bonus points are granted, do they have to be applied uniformly across the property? And no, that's up to your discretion. So you could have multiple heights on the same property or buildings of multiple heights. Another question that came up was the streetscape standards. Those will apply to Burlington and Court Street and also Capitol Street as part of the site plan approval. Be happy to try to answer any other questions.
So just to be clear, the master plan was adopted in 2013,
That's correct.
and it lays out a vision for how that area could be developed. I know you showed a sort of bird's eye view along with this map. So could you draw our attention to what it is recommending or suggesting?
This is the area that currently contains the Pentacrest Garden Apartments, and the plan shows Capitol Street being reopened, and then a series of buildings. In this particular location, it shows a courtyard. However, the university owns part of the western part of the block, and there's a new building going up here. So the full building of this plan isn't possible. I do believe the applicant does have some illustrations or massing studies to show how they might develop the property based on this plan.
Yeah, I know this is not a regulatory instrument, but I would just want to draw attention to a couple other details. I noticed there are 4 buildings. I noticed there's an east-west walkway between the buildings. I noticed there's a courtyard of some type between the easternmost buildings and what has become the music building, the university's music building. So I just noticed those things, along with the north-south street or walkway or whatever that would be. And the last clarifying question, the form-based code was adopted in 2014?
Right.
Is that right?
2014.
Many months later,
Right.
correct? Yeah. All right, and they're 2 separate instruments. The form-based code is, I don't know, the regulatory tool, and the master plan is the vision.
Correct.
That's the way I understand it anyhow. Okay. Any other questions for Bob? Thank you, Bob. Anyone else? Good evening.
Hi. I'm Rob Decker with Axiom Consultants. I represent the owner, the developer.
Rob, can you make sure you're speaking into the microphone,
Yeah,
please?
sorry. Getting my, I have some visuals, as Bob indicated, expanding on our conversation from the last time. See if I can get this to go. All right. All right. So yeah, real quickly, what we're seeking is, mainly focused on the massing and the general scope of the property. As we talked a little bit about the last council meeting, and I know all of you raised some really good points, a wide variety of points amongst the group, all very well taken, and wanted to expand upon some of those, particularly related to the massing of the property and the scope. And you guys were trying to get a feel for the overall thought process that's going behind that. And so the regulating plan, as Bob said, allows for 8. The intent on this, I do have them up there, thanks. So the, can you hear me all right? The intent on the property, I tried to break them into, or our team did, trying to break them into sort of the street and the building, because I know those are sort of together, obviously, but also sort of independently. The building is going to be more sort of through the design review, and the street's going to be in tandem working with Public Works and again with council and P&Z most likely. So the intention would be to transfer this section of town, has a 100-foot right-of-way, quite a bit wider than many sections of downtown, to transfer that 100-foot right-of-way along Capitol Street. The developer would prefer to have vehicular traffic in there, a 2-lane with parking along the side. That being said, that process will, and it would be our intention to proceed with Public Works staff and with the powers that be at the city to make sure that is completed in the way that the city sees is the best fit for the corridor. I have a visual of it we'll get to in a second, but the intent would be to do a similar, obviously at a very conceptual level at this point, but to do a similar style of streetscape through that area as a block to the east. However, that's pretty impermeable heavy, I would say. I think we would have a lot more option for a little bit more creativity in terms of green space, as you mentioned earlier, with some kind of courtyard, some collaborative spaces for students or residents or whoever, or probably a mix thereof of whoever ended up in that particular space. So in terms of the building, the plan would be, as we mentioned, and as Bob mentioned at the last meeting, the intention would be to go to 15 stories and to get that through those credits that he just broke down in a very nice way. Obviously, the right-of-way transfer, the Tate Arms, the historic preservation would be the primary things. Affordable housing and some of the other things that you're all familiar with could provide some of the additional, but there's quite a bit of square footage there available for that transfer of the Capitol Street right-of-way. The step backs would be intended to be on some of those kind of kickbacks on the building that were shown previously and that we'll show in a second. Also roof areas, some of those setback terraces to provide the required green space for the project. Obviously, again, conceptual at this point, but we believe that the building with the 15 stories would be pretty similar to the if I put HGI, I think I did. That's Hilton Garden Inn, and I'll show you that on the aerial next. But the height of that would be similar to. I tried at the bottom to didn't try, but I put the heights of some of the surrounding buildings, and I can point some of those out to you as it kind of kicks around from different viewpoints. If you'd like, I think. I don't know, my laser pointer will work, so I can kind of point those out to you. But the Hilton Garden Inn is a 12-story building, but it's by rights with the upper story being pretty kicked up in terms of vaulted ceiling. It's more representative of about a 14-story height, and it's going to be about a similar scale as ours as the topography drops off as it heads down the hill. Even though this building will be a little bit higher, those heights are going to give you a pretty similar view and stay under that what we would presume to be that FAA elevation. Obviously, it's going to have to be regulated through the FAA like anything over there. So, as mentioned at the last council meeting, it's going to require a level 2 design review, and it's our intent, obviously, as Bob just mentioned, going above that 10 stories is going to involve coming back here to speak to all of you and to P&Z as well. So. Again, just mentioning that you want to utilize that credit for the preservation of those previously preserved historic properties, pull that density in from the contiguous neighborhoods into this, where it was prescribed in this Riverfront Crossings master plan and form-based zoning. And then we mentioned that at the last meeting, that the intent of these two buildings is to have a lot of amenities in those buildings, pool, basketball court, workout area, a number of collaborative spaces for the residents. So again, and I think you guys all have the handout, hopefully, but the heights of the buildings are put there. So tried to label these today so that hopefully you can kind of get your viewpoint. But looking at the site from the northwest, and there's some similarity to the plan. There's some changes too, especially in that northeast corner, which would be in the lower left on this particular project, or on this particular rendering. But if you want me to, I'm going to go through these because there's 4 of them relatively quickly. But the northeast view, so this would be, we're going to kind of swing around to the northeast, looking at it. There's School of Music. For those who are trying to get your frame of reference, the School of Music's here. The Hilton Garden Inn, which I was mentioning in terms of a very similar height, is here. We rendered that kind of over top of the existing construction. The courthouse is here, and the new building, if you see that on your packet, I think it's called the Rise at 316 is how I worded it in there. That's this building. They kind of look blobbed together there, but so you have the 8-story Rise there, the about 14-story view here. That new, I believe it's a hotel or 2 hotel buildings going here, and the School of Music here. This is going to be kind of floating over the top of the courthouse, kind of hovering over like in a helicopter, so you're sitting at the southeast corner and then the southwest corner. So you sort of have your 4 views there as you kind of swing around it. And then I wanted to, because I was referencing it earlier, getting some pictures of some streetscape, some good streetscape elements from up on Clinton, just a block up. This collaborative space that sits along Clinton provides a good example of potentially some stormwater detention and some areas where residents or people visiting the area could hang out. And if you look at these sort of kick-ins, and this is set, the maximum setback, I believe, is 8 feet in that area, and so there could be some opportunities to adjust, that as we work through with staff in terms of design review, in terms of those unique spaces along that corridor. And then this is shown with a 2-lane road coming through here, similar to south of the project. When you come down by the courthouse, there's a 2-lane road with then parking on the side. Whether if there was parking allowed up here, whether that would be angled or parallel would be we would work through that with Public Works staff. But because of the commercial that's going to be obviously, in line with the Capitol sitting right up here and opening this corridor up, there's going to be some really good opportunities for commercial here, and then kicking around on Burlington. And as you mentioned, as Bob mentioned previously, the streetscape will have to wrap these areas, and those will be the very high value areas for those commercial opportunities. So that's, the developer would like to put in parking there to sort of service those commercial areas that sit in there. Hopefully that gives a little more of a, and if you want to see a bigger version or there's a particular angle you want to see, just let me know if there's one of those that.
Have you received any pushback at all or had any discussions from the University of Iowa relating to Foxman building? Because it seems like, at least on the east side, that's really going to block Foxman in terms of their views. Any discussion with them? Or
we have had discussions with the University of Iowa. In fact, I would say the discussions that we've had, and it's been relatively high level, and the developers had a few more than I've been involved in, but in the discussions I've been involved in, they've actually been the opposite. They're very proactive for this project. They really want to see it. I think I mentioned it at the previous meeting. They have some future plans for some of this stuff down here, and opening up this corridor for them is a very important feature. They are also going, I don't want to get into all of the university issues, but I've heard them talking about not enough beds. And obviously, you're all familiar with the fact that they built 2 additional dorms and are looking at a shortage of beds still, despite that, which is a whole different series of issues. But I think this project is very appealing to them for a number of reasons. Opening up that corridor, the new engineering building in here provides, there's a lot of traffic going through that direction. So my particular interaction, I believe the developers as well, has been overwhelmingly positive with the university. In fact, they have expressed to me personally, is there anything we can do to sort of facilitate the project? So,
thank you.
You haven't said, excuse me, Rob, you haven't said too much about the internal uses of the buildings. I mean, I assume that it's almost entirely student housing oriented, but I don't know that. Can you say more about how many units roughly would be involved, et cetera?
Sure. I mean, in terms of, obviously, I don't think it's going to come as any mystery to anyone that units located in this area and pulling the density that the plan calls out, that was mentioned previously by Bob and by myself, and also the university's interest here. That's because there's going to be high interest for student housing here, I think incredibly high. That being said, I think there's also a lot to be said with the School of Music and some of the other things that are popping up in this area, especially with the hotels in the area, that I think there's probably likely to be a mix in there of non-student residents and student residents. Sorry, what was the other part? You asked
What are the uses going to be?
Oh, I'm sorry. You asked about number of units. So obviously it's very early to say that, but I think figuring around 400 to 500 units per side, if you will, per sort of west side and east side, So
add the two together?
Yeah, so 800 to 1,000 units in there, a mix of all different sizes of bedroom, 1, 2, 3. So.
And you're looking at commercial on the first floor or 2 or something?
Just the first floor, yes.
First.
Yep.
How many units are there currently in the Pentecost Garden? Do you know that off the top of your head?
96, so just shy of 100.
100 is all? Okay.
Yeah, 96, I think. Let's see. We're trying to figure out if we have any other questions we want to ask you.
Go ahead,
Rob.
I'm signing in.
Why don't you just be patient with us? I mean, it's a major project. One doesn't leap into such things in a cavalier fashion. I think I heard, Bob, where's Bob? Yeah, you don't have to get up, but I'm pretty sure I heard Bob say that the intention would be that the first floor streetscape amenities would be required on Burlington Street, but also on Capitol Street. Yeah, I just wanted to be clear about that also, instead of just Burlington Street.
You mentioned housing or student housing. I don't know where Gustav is. I don't know if he's going to come up or Austin's going to come up as well. One of the things that's mentioned previously by Ben is the affordability of the student housing. And so, you mentioned the university is overwhelmingly supportive. what can you say to that element in general about affordability? Any conversation, connection in relation to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that those discussions would happen in tandem with the city. Obviously, to get the height bonus, some of those requirements are going to be there. I think this is the intention to provide those requirements at a minimum, as prescribed to get to the height bonus. Those questions would be better. Sorry.
I think with regard to affordable housing, the code requires, what's the minimum percentage? 10% of rental units
Right.
must be affordable. This has nothing to do with bonus provisions.
Right, and then, I don't know if you guys want to speak to that in terms of affordable housing portion. Sure. Yep. So, we would provide, as the developer said, we would provide what's needed for the affordable housing per the city code, and, work with city staff from there.
I'd like to clarify one point. Kingsley, you said basically since the university is strongly supportive of this project, are words to that effect.
Sure.
I'd like to just note that we have not heard from the university, and not to claim you're misstating anything,
sure.
Rob, but it's pretty much hearsay. If the university has an opinion about this, we need to hear it from the university,
Sure.
not from, if you will, the developer or anybody else from the university.
Yeah, and I mean, I just want to obviously, that I wanted to make that statement because of Rockney's question,
Sure.
so.
So we commissioned a significant, with the university and with Coralville, we commissioned a significant study of the current and projected housing market. And I don't remember all the details now. I do remember that there have been a large number of apartment buildings constructed or planned for construction within the next few years. I do know that I've heard landlords speak about increasing vacancy rates within the Iowa City area. So I wonder, to be blunt, why a developer would want to build 800 to 1,000 residential units in a situation in a context where vacancy rates are already higher than they were just a few years ago, projected to be higher in the near-term future, and knowing that some landlords are worried about that. So can you help me understand that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, speaking to your question, I would say vacancy rates, to my knowledge, are the levels that existed a number of years ago were incredibly low, almost, I would say, outrageously low. I heard some estimates in terms of, sub 1%. The numbers that I've heard more recently are still in the single digits, which a number of communities would love to have. I think that a combination of the regulating plan, as we, all the stuff that we talked about earlier, attempting to pull the density down here to where it's a better use and pull it out of the neighborhoods, also to reward the preservation of historic properties. I think this particular site, with its proximity to the old Capitol, proximity to the wellness center, rec center, whatever you want to call it, and possibly a new one of those, as they're talking about expanding that, I believe, to the south, and all of the other amenities that are popping up in this part of town. It's a very unique property, and I think that it's probably not, I think that it fits well with the student life that's going to exist in this particular part of campus. There are not other, I agree with you, Jim, that there are properties, whatever you want to call them, dime a dozen properties, or a number of these areas that are very similar. I would argue that this property is incredibly unique. It's unique for a multitude of reasons. It's unique because of what it is going to allow in terms of the open, as we mentioned at the previous meeting, the opening of what I would call a mistake during urban renewal, and allowing for the correction of that mistake and getting a world-class project at the same time that can offer a lot of amenities, not just for students, but also for people traveling through the corridor in this proximity to downtown. I think that, yes, assuming that there will be a lot of students in this building, I don't think anyone is trying to disagree with that, but I think this is a very appropriate spot for students. I think in particular next to the Wellness Center and potential future wellness center, as well as other amenities that are going to come up for the university and the city. So I would say that while I think your point is great, I think it's a question that we all ask, and I think that this property provides a really unique opportunity to get the city a really, maybe not world-class project is a bit of but a really unique project for the city that's not something you're just going to see every day, in this part of town. There just aren't that many of these spots left where you can do this type of thing. And I think that's what the plan, I would argue that that's what the plan that we talked about early in the meeting was identifying, that this red South Down sub-district provided for that particular opportunity. That answer your question, sort of?
Yeah, sure. Any other questions for Rob? We might ask you more questions as we go along here, but thanks, Rob.
Okay.
Would anybody else like to address this topic?
I forgot, Rob, one more thing. Parking, sorry. I was trying to type and look at my notes.
Oh, that's all right.
Parking.
Yeah, so the parking, Bob can probably speak to this a little bit too, but the parking requirements for this structure are, I believe, half of what is normally required. It's normally a half parking spot, and it's a quarter for these particular units. It's a quarter. Because of the footprint of these buildings, I don't think parking will be an issue for what we're talking about in terms of scale. Should be fine. Should be insular within the building itself.
Thanks.
Underground, obviously.
Good evening, Anna. Haven't seen you for a while.
Is that to your benefit, maybe? Well, I've seen some of the issues with this, and I think this would be a real diamond for Iowa City because it will attract people who maybe are not students, who work at the university, who work at the hospital, who don't necessarily want to live in housing outside of town anymore. We're seeing a lot of people that want to come back into the city. You see that with a number of the condos that have been built. There's a good market for this, and with all of the amenities that are in this building, ooh, I want to live there too. I mean, yeah, it's really pretty. There's parking, and I've seen the work that these folks do all over, and I think that the city would be real miss if they didn't accept this as they want to build it. So please consider it, because it would be a really pretty project. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna.
Hi, Gustav Stewart, student liaison. I just wanted to talk a little bit kind of briefly about the dynamics I see with this. And first off, that generally speaking, having higher density buildings in those areas will be beneficial. I mean, that has been expressed through the Riverfront Crossings form-based code, the master plan, and that this could be a really good spot for student housing. That it will increase the housing supply and Although this is just one development, through the accumulation of several developments, by increasing the housing supply, we are taking the pressure off of traditional neighborhoods, and we are hopefully increasing vacancy rates. So hopefully we will see more affordability for the overall person that is looking for housing, especially students, as this is an issue that we have seen constant over and over again. I also want to mention that for the study, I believe it was around 3,000 units it was lacking in supply for that study that you're referring to, or give or take. But then this area is very close to campus, so it increased walkability because you're right next to campus. So that means less people are probably going to drive to campus, encouraging that walkability. In addition, the opening of Capitol Street is what I believe essential because we're seeing further development in that area. The university is also looking at, from conversations I remember, that they're looking at developing more stuff down there for potential housing because, again, of that issue, and a potential look at a 2-year live-in requirement. Because there are already a significant amount of people that walk through there, whether it's to the parking lot or whether it's to get off campus. So I think opening up the Capitol Street is going to be great for both the university and the community. So that being said, it's always good to do substantial review with a development of this size, but at the same time, I think it's important that we see a higher density development occurring because it'll increase the housing supply for renters and hopefully reducing the pressure off those neighborhoods and increasing the overall affordability. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Gustav. Anyone else? All right, I don't see anyone else who wants to speak to this, so I need to ask the council if you are inclined to vote in accordance with the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation, which is to approve the proposed rezoning. If we don't, if we're not inclined to do that, we'd continue the public hearing to allow time for consultation with the Planning and Zoning Commission. So let's discuss that. I don't know what you folks would like to do, so we need to find out. So are you inclined to support tentatively? We're not making firm decisions here yet.
I am at this point because we're not making the decision, as I understand it, especially on the basis of our detailed discussion from last meeting. We're not deciding 15 stories tonight. We are deciding step one, which has been talked about before, which is a minimum of 8 stories. So I'm supportive of it at this time, and I'll further elaborate once we have actual discussion. But
I'm supportive, and I'm going to elaborate once we move on to further discussion.
I'm supportive.
I have concerns about approving this step in the project. I did, since our last meeting, look at the comprehensive plan, which we talked about at our last meeting, and tried to understand what the downtown Riverfront Crossings master plan had to say about this site. The emphasis on the staff's presentation was primarily on the regulatory framework following the master plan, but I wanted to get a better understanding of the master plan itself, the vision. And so some of the factors, and Bob showed the plan image of that. In looking at the master plan, there were some development standards regarding building heights for this particular site. The building heights diagram, the same diagram that we discussed when we were looking at the TIF standards for the downtown. That building height diagram showed at the 2 corners of Capitol in Burlington, a 17 to 15 level height, and that was part of a larger concept for the Burlington corridor, where taller buildings were placed at certain corners along Burlington. The remainder of the perimeter block was shown as 4 to 6 levels, and the text referred to the fact that this building type is concentrated in the South Downtown Central Crossing subdistricts, where they would reinforce their pedestrian-friendly intent. There also were, in the development standard, some special requirements, and there the master plan was emphasizing creating a well-connected urban fabric. And among the features contributing to that goal with respect to this project were its axial relationship to Old Capitol and the close proximity to the county courthouse building, which is a prominent landmark in the area. It also recommended enhanced facade treatments at the corners of Burlington and Capitol due to their high visibility. Some of the other considerations I would add was that the pedestrian network connectivity within the downtown Capitol Street corridor, which would be reinstated, so to speak, with this project, would serve as a major north-south pedestrian spine through the downtown, between the downtown campus area and Riverfront crossings. And then lastly, I would say, with respect to the context, the School of Music is directly to the east, and that building was an important factor when we were considering the design of the Euronymous project on the corner of Clinton and Burlington, and it seems that it should be considered now in the discussion of the project at 12 East Court. So I then took those standards as indicated in the comprehensive plan for the downtown Riverfront crossings area and tried to translate them into more regulatory language. So with respect to building placement and form, in terms of, with respect to building placement, 4 distinct buildings would be placed as shown in the downtown Riverfront crossings master plan, and I think actually the drawings we're seeing in a sense reflect that. With respect to building height and facade step backs, except for the 2 Burlington Capitol Street corners, maximum building height would be 7 stories. So I took the 4 to 6 level concept as reflected in the master plan and expanded it to 7 to reflect some of the recent projects we've been seeing where 7-story buildings are being placed not only on the corners but through the block. And at the 2 Burlington Capitol corners, a maximum building height of 10 stories. I also noted that the facade step-back requirements might be waived by the Design Review Committee with consideration given to building designs which show a visible base, a middle no more than 7 stories, and a top. And then the last condition to be considered would be the treatment of the open space, particularly the Capitol Street corridor, and there that the building envelope would allow a minimum of 5 hours of sunlight on that corridor from March 21st to September 21st. So the idea there is that given the importance of the Capitol Street corridor, that there be a minimum amount of sunlight penetrating to the ground floor, the street level, from the spring to the fall equinox. So those were, again, some of taking the master plan, not the regulatory plan, but the master plan and trying to understand how that would be applied to this particular site.
It seemed, I mean, I've said I'm going to vote yes on this, but while I appreciate the concerns that you have, it seems like that's going way beyond the simple rezoning to riverfront crossings when so many of those details are things that have to be worked out in the design review process.
That's what I was going to say. Like, I viewed this as an opportunity to get the 8 in place where they would then have the incentive to come back and invest in a design that we could then impact.
we're talking potential 10, not the 8, but the 2 and the potential 10, and then the 5 if they would want to come before us. And I just find it a bit ironic that there was mention of the historic preservation credit that would be given when looking at those pictures, one of the most iconic historical buildings downtown besides the old Capitol is the courthouse, and it's just dwarfed by those buildings. And I find that to be sad for that height bonus.
So
I'll try to think. I've been going to do this in the past, and I haven't done it. I have some incredibly good pictures from Washington, D.C. of very modern buildings built almost wall to wall with beautiful historic buildings. Some of them are churches. And it's the way it's done in lots of places. And they aren't even a street or a block apart. They are perfectly adjacent. And it's different. It's certainly contrasting in terms of the new and the old, but it works. And I think when you go back and look at the Riverfront Crossings Master Plan and you look at the form-based code, and even if you just look at the Riverfront Crossings Plan, I don't see how we cannot move forward with this rezoning when we have so many other steps in the process in terms of any of the bonus height. I mean, the developer has agreed to a conditional zoning agreement that any design is going to get reviewed and have to be approved by P&Z. And then certainly if we go to the design 2 level for anything over 10 stories, it's got to come back to us as well. So there's plenty of steps further down the process to have input on that, but this certainly meets that high density. I think Gustav spoke to a number of the points I was going to make very, very well. So to me, it makes sense to go ahead with the rezoning.
So I'd like to share some of my own views about this. And I'd like to begin by saying it's been really helpful to see these design images and the text associated with it. So I want to thank Rob and the developer for presenting this material to us. It helps me understand what you have in mind better, and that certainly is something I really sensed we needed to have, and I mentioned that in our last meeting. So anyhow, thank you for doing that. So I'm going to try to go through a line of thought that is affected by what you've presented to me tonight rather than what I was imagining you were going to present. So the first thing I want to say is that rezoning the property would generally be consistent with the Riverfront Master Plan, Riverfront Crossings Master Plan. And as Susan said last meeting, that was a plan that was developed with a great deal of input from the public, and which I like a lot. I think it's really a terrific plan. But note, I'm referring to the Riverfront Crossings Master Plan. I especially admire the plan's call for 4 separate buildings. This is why I asked Bob to show that bird's eye view. 4 separate buildings of varying heights and shapes, divided north-south with an extended Capitol Street and east-west with a pedestrian walkway, with a courtyard between the eastern buildings and what is now Foxman Music. The Foxman Music Building. So I noticed that the renderings, or not renderings, bird's eye views you've given us, massing studies and so on, are generally consistent with, in terms of footprint at least, generally consistent with that part of the master plan. And it certainly is a good location for student housing. I think Gustav's done a great job of articulating that, so I won't go back through it. So my concern is not about a rezoning that would be consistent. It's not about a rezoning that would be consistent with the master plan. I think we see that it would be. Rather, my concerns have to do with 2 things. First, the fundamental ways in which the development would, if we rezone without adding other conditions, deviate from the Riverfront Crossings Master Plan. And the primary way in which it deviates is in the cumulative mass, the heights of the buildings. Instead of 4 to 6 stories And that's what it called for, right, John? 4 to 6 stories?
4 to 6, except on the corners.
Except on the corners. Instead of that, what we see is 4 15-story buildings. So that's a big deviation. Okay, so why the deviation? The answer is the form-based code. That's why I asked Bob about the fact that the form-based code was adopted many months after the Riverfront Crossings Master Plan. The form-based code was adopted at a moment before a major action happened that affects my thinking about this project. The form-based code was adopted before we approved the rise at Lennon Court, a 14 and a 15-story building, 2 separate buildings, 14 and 15 stories, with 350 or so student residential units, student-oriented residential units in them. So we developed a form-based code under the assumption that we really needed to have high-density student housing in this location before we knew that a really high-density student-oriented housing development would be developed at Lennon Court Street. So the facts on the ground differ now from what the facts were on the ground when we adopted the form-based code. So I think it is far too dense. I have no objection to rezoning the property. I have no objection to the footprints. I have no objection to virtually everything I heard Rob say, except I think the cumulative mass or the fact that they're all 15-story buildings is far greater than what we need now. That's what I think. So I believe we would need another condition on the rezoning to affect that. That's my view.
Don't we already have the authority to make those modifications to get it in line with what your concerns are?
How so?
Because that was exactly my thought process.
How so?
Because they can't get over 10 stories without coming back to City Council for approval.
I would, if I would on that topic, I think it's important to send a pretty clear signal to the developer on what you will be willing to consider when it comes to height, because if you are only willing to grant that 8-story right, if you will, my guess is the developer is not going to move forward with this project. It's been clearly articulated to me and mentioned again tonight that the developer's interest is to maximize density. It's not to say that you would have to say 15 stories, but some clarity is probably needed on behalf of the developer between 8 and 15. Better now than just kicking that down the road, because they're going to be spending tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars on design work, looking at that 15-story design.
But to that point, I think that's why in terms of the rezoning, that gives them the uncertainty that at the very least, they're going to get 8 stories, and so the finances of doing the design to get us the details are there.
That's fine, but they won't move forward on 8 stories. That's what's been said to me. I just want you to know that.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but then they're at 8, there's 15, and there's a process in place.
So remember, we're just trying to figure out whether tentatively we want to express agreement with the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation or not. So that's the question we need to answer ultimately. Along the lines of the conversation we're having, I can tell you, over the past several months, I've had lots of people say to me, why is Iowa City building or approving the construction of so many new large apartment buildings? Now, to a degree, I have an answer to that, and we've talked about it a lot in our council meetings, so I usually give the same answer. More housing is a good thing. We have an affordability problem and so on. I don't want to go through the details. But there are a lot of people out there who are just flummoxed about the fact that we're approving more and more large new buildings. They're not here tonight, so I can't speak for them anymore. So let's see. I do, I mean, given what Jeff was saying, Susan, I understand your point, we do have these, there are 2 other review steps involved. But if we don't signal now what we would be willing to accept, then it would be unfair to the developer, I think. Yep.
I would agree with that, but I still think we can close the public hearing and have the first vote if we have a majority of people that doesn't mean the developers have to go forward. I think at our next meeting, we can have more discussion and people can make their points clear about what they. My sense is there are people on this council who will not support anything higher than 8 stories, no matter how good it looks. That's just my sense.
I don't know that that's true.
I don't know, but that's my sense. There's been comments from people that they don't like tall buildings. And so, I won't go through all my reasons. We've spent enough time on that. I think we can vote tonight, and I think either tonight or in our next meeting, and maybe even more tonight once we close the public hearing and actually have, quote, more discussion. We're still in the public hearing right now. Give them an idea what you think you're going to support. I mean, if they're not going to, if no matter what they do, they're not going to be able to get the height that they want in terms of going forward, then I think, as Jeff said, we might as well signal that to them tonight. It doesn't mean we can't go forward with the rezoning. They may want to continue with the rezoning, but not pursue the project right now. But at least they get the rezoning done.
Yeah, I mean, for me, from a process standpoint, I'm just a little confused on the discussion. So ultimately, the question before us, as you articulated, Jim, is whether or not we're interested in the rezoning. And so, I mean, from that standpoint, I think we need to answer that question and then move to the discussion piece.
I agree.
I mean, because I have some stuff to say based on comments that have been said, but I've just waited because I think that we need to focus on just whether or not we're inclined to go ahead with it.
So the question at hand is, are you inclined to support the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation that we approve the rezoning with the conditions specified by the commission?
Yes.
Yes. If you are, please nod yes.
Yes.
If you are not. All right, so it's 3-3. That tells, I believe that means we really should offer to consult with the Planning and Zoning Commission, given the fact that Mazahir is not here.
Well, it would fail right now.
Supermajority.
So,
Yeah, and
yes,
I don't want it to fail right now.
Offer a consult.
I would prefer to have consultation with the Planning and Zoning Commission. And Maz isn't here. I mean, to be fair to everybody, we should have all 7 members present if we're this
Well,
balanced.
she may not be back till August.
Yeah, and she won't be here.
Well, that's true.
So,
Well, I still think it would be wise to have consultation
well,
with
we
the
have to
commission.
because a 3-3 fails. So,
Yeah.
So then my question is where do we have an opportunity to discuss?
I can't hear you.
Where do we have the opportunity to discuss? I mean, if it fails, where do we have the opportunity to discuss?
Well,
it's
you're
not
not
fair.
voting right now. What you're trying to decide is whether the majority is inclined to go with the P&Z's recommendation. It does not appear that that's the case. So if that's not the case, then you need to offer a consult to P&Z.
So we have to offer a consult, given that fact.
Yeah.
I guess I just still don't understand the reluctance of council members to vote for the rezoning when there are so many other steps that have to be done before they can do anything over 8 stories. Even though we signal potentially to them, at this point, you may not get more than 8 stories. What is wrong with going forward with the rezoning?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think Rockne articulated it to me pretty clearly, and this was some of my same, not necessarily points, but why I felt comfortable moving forward at our last meeting is ultimately we're looking at an 8-story building, and that's why I think I asked Bob again the clear kind of points of which council has another shot at this or, kind of have a different outlook. Because what we've done prior in these situations is, if there is any type of height that's being discussed, we have had that conversation as far as what we'd want to see and what we'd look like. And the developer has come back and shared more information or changed the building type. I have some concern, and this is a different, a little bit different project, but, again, I was, one of the council members that, focused on the come and go on First Avenue. And I, First Avenue and Muscatine, and I, stated, there's some things that are problematic from a community standpoint. There needs to be some changes here and changes there. And I think the resounding notion I heard from council at the time was, this is a part of the regulatory framework. If you have an issue with it, come back before us with different thoughts on design or talk about changes in the code. And ultimately, I understand that this is a different project as far as the density is concerned, but to me, it's a similar process from the standpoint of, they're coming forward with a rezoning for 8 stories. I feel very comfortable with 8 stories. I have some concerns about going up to the 15-story height with some of the comments that you've made, Jim, as far as the building heights and whether building heights can be different. I do feel like that's a conversation that we'll have when we're talking about the height bonus. From a design review standpoint, as Pauline, you mentioned, in the 2 additional stories, I have a lot of faith and confidence not only in our staff, but also the Planning and Zoning Commission as it pertains to that. Not necessarily the 2 stories that focused on the staff review level. I get the comments, and this is interesting for me because I'm doing a lot of traveling now, and I get the comments about height in relation to the different building types. And, part of me, even as I walk by the Chauncey project, in looking at it, and I know I'm throwing out a bunch of different projects, and so, bear with me. It's like, is it really that high? At the street level, am I looking up and really just staring at, how high the building is in relation to all the different things that's happening? I don't know that I am. I'm interested in setbacks and how that's going to potentially alleviate some of the height deficiencies or things that I may see as I'm walking on Court Street, or as I'm walking on Capitol Street, or as I'm walking on Burlington Street. But these, again, are all considerations that I think are going to happen later on in the process. And I plan on signaling to staff, these are considerations that I'd like to have for them to think about as they're going through their own design review process. I just want to make sure we're having the right conversation, because I agree with you. I do think it's appropriate for us to signal to developers, if we're not interested in 15 stories, let's not waste time and money. I totally understand that. But I also think we need to get to a understanding, or at least a standpoint, or at least my standards, and may not necessarily be as articulate as John, as far as, introducing comprehensive plan elements or introducing, form-based code elements and how those cross-reference each other. But I would say that in general, when I talk to the folks that are more interested in this particular building site, there's a high level of interest in relation to the CRWC, the Recreation Center down to the left corner, bottom left of the page, in relation to the university, in relation to the music building. My biggest concern is the affordability, and I think those things are going to be articulated. I'll have the same questions when we talk about potential height bonuses later on, so just know that from that standpoint. I just think we have to be careful here, and I appreciate the conversation about the topography as well, because that puts me in a different state of mind than it does if we were talking about it in a different piece of property in the downtown area. This particular location, I agree with Rob, I agree with what Rob said around it's uniquely located. If this was, closer to the President's house, I may feel uncomfortable, or just any other area downtown. But where it's located right now, it makes me feel a lot differently about this property than wherever it's located. And so those are also considerations that I'm taking in with this project. But ultimately, the question before me is the 8-story building. Do I have some comfortable or concern, or some general concerns, and will I feel more comfortable After maybe hearing more from the developer after the next stage of the process, yes. But ultimately, right now, I feel good about it. And I mean, I'm hoping that with our conversation today and potential support of the rezoning, the developer can come back to us with more thoughts along Rocky's lines, more thoughts about what that setback could be. What are some of the other pieces that we brought up around affordable housing? I know, Jim, you brought up different building heights. Pauline, you brought up, the relative view as it relates to the courthouse. I think those are things that I full well expect the developer to be heeding and taking that in mind and then coming back to us with a different product later on. I just think for right now, we just need to focus on the rezoning and moving forward on the 8 stories. Sorry, that was a long, elongated answer, but I wanted to address some of the comments that have been made.
Okay, unless anybody else has comments to make, what we have is a 3-3 split. What we are required to do is offer a consult with the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Well, before you move on, I thought I was pretty convincing, and so if there's any changes that people want to make in relation to that, I'm interested to hear that as well.
You were very persuasive. You're a persuasive guy. So, without objection, that's what we need to do.
Well, you're going to need a motion to defer the...
Could I have a motion to defer? So you continue the public hearing, defer
First consideration
to our meeting in July the 3rd, and offer a consult with the Planning and Zoning Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Botchway, seconded by Thomas. We need a roll call.
No.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
I can't.
Motion carries 5-1.
Okay.
Rockne in the negative. All right. Could I have a motion to accept correspondence, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Botchway, second by Thomas. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move to item 6B. All right, item 6B, rezoning 1705 Prairie du Chien Road. This is an ordinance conditionally rezoning approximately 1.89 acres from planned development overlay, high-density single-family, OPD, RS12 zone, to low-density multifamily, RM12 zone, for the property located at 1705 Prairie du Chien Road. I'll open the public hearing. Hi, Bob.
I would like to point out the location of the property. It's on the west side of Prairie du Chien Road, just south of Interstate 80. Foster Road, which is proposed to be constructed beginning this year, is just to the north of the property, north and west. The area to the west was recently rezoned with a planned development overlay to, it's currently zoned high-density, single-family. The planned development overlay allows clustering of the units into townhouses and a senior housing project. The area to the east of Prairie du Chien Road is zoned low-density single-family, as well as the area to the south of this property. The property is currently developed with a manufactured housing park. I believe it has 11 units. 9 of them are occupied. The comprehensive plan speaks specifically to this property, identifying it as an area that would be appropriate for low-density multifamily if the manufactured housing park were ever to redevelop. It also noted that the construction of Foster Road in this area would support redevelopment in this general area. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed this application and, along with staff, did find it in compliance with the comprehensive plan. The commission did, however, place some conditions on their recommendation after viewing a concept plan submitted by the applicant where he had indicated he was in agreement to limiting the development to a 2 to 2.5-story building, although the underlying zoning, as well as the surrounding zoning, allows a 35-foot height limit, which is a 3-story building generally. The remainder of the neighborhood, or most of the neighborhood, is developed with 1- and 2-story buildings, and that's the reason for the condition limiting it to 2 stories. The applicant did submit some character illustrations of the types of buildings he would like to build. However, those are not specific plans, and for that reason, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended that there be a design review process for the eventual construction on this property. The Planning and Zoning Commission, at their first meeting, asked the applicant to present a relocation plan for the current residents of the property. At the next meeting, the applicant did indicate that he would agree to a 9-month time frame or notice to the current residents that once, if the zoning is approved, the occupants would have 9 months to leave the property. He also at that time had offered a relocation assistance of $1,000, I believe, per household. That has since been amended to $2,000, and you have a new conditional zoning agreement that includes that proposal. So again, both Planning and Zoning Commission and staff have recommended approval with conditions. Be happy to try to answer any questions.
So the amount of the assistance can be part of the conditional zoning framework. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, for example,
They've signed a conditional zoning agreement that has that figure in it.
okay, $2,000.
Bob, part of the record we have before us in our packet is some information that Eleanor and, I don't know, maybe Tracy put together for us concerning relocation assistance and what the past actions of the city have been with regard to that. I don't know if you're in a position to talk about that, or Eleanor is, or Tracy is. I
can talk about it.
Yeah, could you please?
You know, I think what council asked for was just a review of relocation requirements and when, you know, there are federal relocation requirements and state relocation requirements. Those kick in when there's federal money involved or when there's a condemnation. And so they're not applicable here. I think we gave you some examples of the URA, or the Uniform Relocation Act requirements in projects that we've done. And then we gave you a couple examples of when that's not been a requirement. And I think those two were the recent Rose Oaks one. That was assistance provided by the city, not by the developer. And then we also looked way back at the Towncrest Mobile Home Court assistance that was actually part of a conditional zoning agreement at the time. So I think what you need to keep in mind when you're looking at the relocation issue in connection with the rezoning is the Iowa Code requires or allows for the imposition of conditions to address public needs created by the rezoning.
Yeah.
And so directly caused by the rezoning.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the focus that you need to have, I think.
Yeah, thank you. We may return to that, but it could be somebody else wants to talk to us about this. So anybody else want to address this topic? This particular rezoning, that is?
Again, my name is Charlie Eastham. We live at 953 Canton Street. And yes, I do want to talk specifically about the relocation plan that's in part of the CZA for this project. And I want to ask the council to consider a more adequate relocation plan, which in my view, the council can adopt as part of your discretionary rezoning power, because relocation of people who are living in this parcel now, their relocation definitely creates a public need caused by the rezoning. Okay? And I believe that the model that's appropriate here is the one that's being followed in the Forest View redevelopment, where after negotiations between residents and the developers, they've put forth a relocation plan, which has not come to you yet, which will very soon. And that relocation plan calls for up to $7,250, I think, in reimbursements for actual relocation costs for people who decide to leave the Forest View Mobile Home Park and go to another someplace else, and choose not to participate in the new residences that are being created at Forest View. And that relocation plan also has the developers buying at an appraised price any mobile homes that are not able to be moved from the park. And then the developers also agreed to pay the difference between if there's any difference between lot rent for a new location and the current location over a period, I think, of about 4 years. Those are all elements, I think, the major elements of the HUD guidelines, and I think they're appropriate for this instance. Jim, you made a comment earlier in the informal session when you were talking about changing our street design policies, and you said if we continue doing things we have been doing for 30 years or not, we have that choice to make. I would say that we have been rezoning and displacing people who live primarily in mobile homes in this community in instances in the past, and not compensating them completely for their having to move to a new location. And I think that's something we should stop doing, and we should start doing things that are right for people that are living in this.
Charlie, would you please repeat the dollar amount of relocation assistance that's being included tentatively in the Forest View?
In the Forest View plan, I looked this up just a minute ago. It's $7,250, I think, for relocation cost. That's a reimbursement. It's not a payment. The owners purchasing at an appraised value any trailers that cannot be moved from their present location. And then the owners agreed to pay, and if there's any difference in lot rent between the present park and a new park for a period, I think, of up to 4 years. The actual cost of people's mobile homes in these instances is usually in the few thousand to no more than $15,000 range. And as you know, there were 5 or 6 letters from park residents on the Prairie du Chien Park, 5 or 6 letters in the before planning and zoning from park residents, and they talked about what money they have put into their houses, and they're in the few thousand to $15,000 range. And my point would be that the development process the developers and the owners can fairly readily absorb the amount of increased, or the amount of that amount of relocation in the charges for the sale price of new houses or the rental price of new houses. It puts the cost of this development, I think, where it should be on the new residents, and it takes the cost where I think it should not be, which is off the current residents.
Thank you. Good evening, Ross.
Good evening. I'm Ross Nusser. I am the applicant here. I'd like to speak briefly about the process. We've been doing this process since probably January or February, and we've held numerous meetings with the residents of the manufactured housing community. And we have tried to identify their needs, and one of those needs is adequate time to move. And then there's absolutely a financial component here. Now, this site in particular is a very small site relative to some of these other developments that we've seen. It's less than 2 acres. And I don't know what basis there would be to be able to absorb that, the cost that Mr. Eastham just stated, but we are unable, 100% unable to do it. Throughout this process, myself and my business partners have worked with the city to try and identify funds. And it's been frustrating. I mean, this is a community that has been largely forgotten, largely something that there just aren't resources available. And we're trying to, we doubled what we promised of planning and zoning, and we are trying here, but this is about what we can offer. And I'm not saying that this is the best solution for everyone, but this is the solution that we're able to present. And I'd like to answer any questions that you have for me.
Ross, what's been so ultimately you increased that by, 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
What has been the general viewpoint of the residents? I know we received some communication, but,
So I think that generally the timeline for moving out has been acceptable. The 9 months, I think that that's generally been acceptable. We've received, and I've received and forwarded on to council a couple of letters where they're not happy with the amount of relocation money that is being provided. But I would say that that's generally a pretty good synopsis, that the timeline is right, but the amount of money is not up to par.
Do you have any, excuse me, do you have any sense of, when you're talking with these residents, what their plans might be, where they would go, what they would do?
There are a few residents here tonight, and I would think that they might come up and speak to that, but one person has stated that they have found a place already, but beyond that, we're talking about 7 different units that are occupied right now, and I cannot speak for all of them.
I think that just would make a difference for me as far as knowing what their plans are, how much money could they be compensated for to help that.
Yeah.
So I think the relocation assistance point is an important one, but I want to ask you about a different topic.
Sure.
And it has to do with the nature of development all along Prairie du Chien. As you know better than I do, it's all 1 to 2 story, single-family housing. Pretty clearly of a generally, well, I don't want to say uniform design, but it's sort of a consistent, compatible kind of design all along the road. And I know the Planning and Zoning Commission's, one of the conditions has to do with requiring no more than 2 stories for the building that's closest to Prairie du Chien,
Mm-hmm.
and that there be a design review component associated with that, right? So part of what I'm thinking, and I'd like to get your feedback about, is that it would be important for the building to be designed architecturally to be consistent with the general sense of design of the buildings all along Prairie du Chien.
Yeah.
And I know there's detailed variations, so I'm not trying to push it too hard, but you know what I mean. So,
I do. I would agree with that. The one thing that I live off of Prairie du Chien, and so this will be a building that I'll be driving by every day. The one thing that I will state is that a lot of those buildings right on Prairie du Chien, right in that area, are post-war 1950s housing, where they're prefab housing, and so I would agree that the building design needs to be compatible with the area, but I don't necessarily want to emulate some of the immediate surroundings, if that makes sense. I mean, just being able to meld well into that neighborhood, but not to articulate, 1950s very very shallow wall types.
Oh yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So there'd have to be. Yeah, I'm not trying to demand some uniform thing.
No, absolutely.
But, compatibility with the existing neighborhood, I believe, is crucial.
Agreed.
Especially with that building, I want to emphasize that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to build on what Jim just said, because I think this has been an issue that I've been struggling with for many years in Iowa City, this notion of compatibility. It's in our comprehensive plan, it's in our zoning code, and I'd have to say sometimes it doesn't seem to quite meet that expectation once it's completed. But not too long ago came along the notion of the missing middle. And the missing middle, I think, has a more articulate answer to this question of compatibility. And it refers to the notion of housing having a house form, which I think gets at what needs to happen along Prairie du Chien. So what is a house form? A house form might be a building type such as a townhouse or perhaps a fourplex, 2 units below, 2 units above, but within a envelope that looks like a house. So unless you were looking very carefully at the design of the building, you wouldn't even notice that it was 4 units. You would just view it as a 2-story house in terms of its general mass. So that level of refining, I think the conditions were moving in the right direction of 2-story height limit, but I feel there's a need to better articulate and tie down what we mean or what we intend to build along Prairie du Chien.
So if I may, I'd like to address the missing middle. The missing middle was something that was articulated during the form-based code discussions for the North Side District Plan.
Right.
And it was something that was very heavily influenced, during the discussions of that plan. And this neighborhood is not very far away from the North Side District. So I would echo that. I think that that's exactly what is needed there is the missing middle. And I think that it would be consistent with the comprehensive plan as it calls out the low-density multifamily housing. I think that this is a perfect opportunity for the missing middle.
I think as John was talking, I was thinking about the new Prairie Hill development off of Miller Street. And if you haven't been there since it's been taking form, it's absolutely beautiful. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of that missing middle concept. And something designed along that way would be nice for that location also.
Mm-hmm.
I guess one of the questions I have, are there any restrictions that P&Z has placed upon you that could maybe make the project more viable in terms of being able to give the assistance to the residents? I frankly think that, I'll comment at a comment, but anything that can make it more profitable for you?
I wish that there were something. That the problem is the site is relatively small. And like Councilmember Thomas stated, that we're trying to achieve the missing middle here, and we're not trying to get this super compact, high-density housing right here on Prairie du Chien. And so with that, what you cannot see on this aerial here is the back half after that last manufactured housing unit. It falls off, the grade falls off very, very, very significantly. So it's not buildable back there. So we're working with a very, very small basis of land. And we have spent months, literally months, and countless meetings with the city, countless meetings with the state trying to pin down some sort of relocation package that we were basically striking out on. And we came up with what we could best do. And this is what we can best do. Again, we want to be able to provide as much as we possibly can, but with this site, it's just so restrictive in that. And the developer just cannot absorb, a very large amount of money per unit because there's just no profit there.
Any other questions for Ross?
I guess, Ross, you say that, sorry, you say that, but then you moved it up $1,000.
Yeah.
And so what changed?
The thing that changed is that that $1,000, we're going to be taking that basically in the shorts. I mean, it's not going to be fun for us to absorb that, but we wanted to show a good faith effort on, doubling what planning and zoning had recommended. It's not going to be comfortable for us to do that. It's a significant amount of risk. You know, when we're talking about $1,000 here, we're really talking about $20,000. And we're also talking about, you know, the majority of these units here are unable to move. So we will be paying to demolish and to discard of them. And so that will be affected within this. So it's a much larger figure than just the $2,000 that we have here. But nothing's really changed except for the fact that we're willing to stretch our limit a little bit further.
And I appreciate that you increased it to the 2,000, and also the 9-month notice is commendable.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thanks, Ross.
Thank you.
Who else would like to address this topic? Good evening.
Kurt Moore, I own the property. Just a couple of notes. There are 10 units, not 11. Currently, 2 are abandoned, 1 person is moved, and we have an empty lot. So there's not 11. There's actually 10 units, but 6 people left. Around that area, it's already all zoned RM12. We're not asking for anything different than it's already there. Ironically enough, Forest Hills, which is on, the person that owns Forest Hills also owns the lot to the south, Mr. Stintler. We just signed an easement for him so the Foster Road could go through. That was stalled because somewhere along the line it got lost. They needed a storm sewer put in. That's going to go in on the corner of the property there. So Forest Hills is on the way. We helped them along. As I said before, part of the problem with the trailer court is the sewer system. It has Orangeburg, if anybody's familiar with that, it's like a cardboard sewer pipe. It's cast iron galvanized. It was pieced together starting back in the late 40s, early 50s. It's collapsing. I've already replaced 60 feet, and more of it's failing. Same with the water system. It's failing. There's no shutoffs other than the main shutoff for the whole trailer. So if it fails, that means nobody has water, and that's what's happening. Unfortunately, you know, it could happen tomorrow, and the people are going to be, we're looking, you know, can't replace it all. Now's the time to fix this problem, tear it all out and start over. Some of the trailers there, just dates, 6 of them. The oldest one's 1960. The newest one's 1972, which is one of the abandoned ones. The other ones are 1969. Our lot rent is $175 a month. That includes trash, sewer, and water. Nobody in Iowa City does that. Nobody. Basically, it amounts to $350 is what we should be charging. We haven't. We're subsidizing the people. So when you look at, you know, $2,000 and what we're doing, we're giving right now. Other trailer courts, if your trailer's over 10 years old, they kick you out. You're gone. Every place is in trailer courts, it's the same place. You have 30 days notice. That's true everywhere. So it's an unfortunate problem with older trailers. They just go into the ground. That, along with the sewer and water, is an issue. I believe on the south side, those people got $500. Mr. Nusser wants to offer $2,000. You know, that's a significant jump for them to take. That's pretty much it. I think I appreciate you looking at this and considering the fact that it's going to fail. And it's no fault of ours, it's no fault of theirs. The fact of the matter is the trailer court's going to close. And it could be tomorrow because the sewer line fails. And it could be tomorrow because the water line fails. And right now we're on borrowed time. And we can rectify the situation here. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Kurt. Anyone else?
Hi, I'm Sarah Barron, Executive Director of the Johnson County Affordable Housing Coalition. I shared this already with Planning and Zoning, but I want to reiterate it for you all. We're very pleased to see discussion about relocation assistance be a part of this rezoning request, and we cannot speak for the residents in this particular project, nor name a specific dollar amount. We really encourage, though, as you're considering these redevelopment plans, to center the needs of the residents who are being displaced. And again, want to just show our appreciation for you all carefully considering that, as well as the developer and other advocates for the project. So I just wanted to say thanks for your careful consideration of this part of the redevelopment plan.
Thank you, Sarah. Anyone else? Sorry, I'm a little bit surprised. I thought there would be some neighbors from the Prairie du Chien Road area. We've received quite a bit of material in one way or another from them. Okay, so seeing no one else, are you folks inclined to support the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation? Now, before you answer the question, I want to ask you a question, Eleanor. If anybody on our council wants to recommend a fairly minor change in one of the conditions, would we have to consult with the commission?
It depends on what the condition is.
Yeah, so we'll find out. Huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so
You'll
tell us.
Generally, if it's a substantive condition, we're going to have to continue the public hearing if you want to change the conditions, because we won't have a signed CZA, regardless. So.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, what are you inclined to do?
I had a question for Kurt. Jim.
Okay.
I had a question for Kurt. Is it now the appropriate time?
Kurt, could you come back up, please?
Sorry, I should have mentioned that. I didn't know if there's anybody else that wanted to speak. You had mentioned that the trailer court, because of the sewage and because of the water, could fail, tomorrow, or it's failing. What's the process? So you'd close the trailer court, but ultimately, what's the process by which residents would then be displaced, or what's that process?
Fortunately, this is my opinion, because I only know from what I've tore up so far and replaced, and because of, are you familiar with Orangeburg?
Yeah.
Okay, when it goes, it's just nonstop. It just starts, the whole system starts to fail. Unfortunately, with this also, with a lot of places that were built in the late 40s, early 50s, it's anything that was at hand. So you have cast iron, you have galvanized, and you have Orangeburg. It's all in there. And you start at one end, you probably have to dig up the whole place, completely around, and replace all the sewer. And when you replace all the sewer, you're going to replace all the water. When you replace all the water, that means you have to replace all your standpipes also. So it's not just a matter of running water, pipe around and hooking it up. You have to, dig underneath each trailer. It's a huge project. It's not a simple project.
No, I appreciate that. Let me clarify the question a little bit more, though. I'm just focused on,
what's going to happen to them?
Yeah, so you'd have to close the trailer court.
They would be, there wouldn't be any water and sewer.
Would they, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I don't know, what happens to anybody else in this town when something fails? They go find themselves someplace else to live. I do property maintenance for apartment buildings, and things happen. Sewer waters break. They have to go find a room someplace else. Unfortunately, I'm just giving you the heads up of what the facts are, and this is an unfortunate problem when something's built that long ago. Things fail. In this case, the whole place is failing. I don't know if there's the right answer for what you want. Am I going to dig into my pocket and pay for everybody to go live someplace else for who knows how long? I don't have that kind of money. Remember, I only charge them $175 a month. that's, I'm not the golden egg.
I think what Kingsley might want to know, and you may not know the answer to this, would there be any way that they would qualify for assistance, such as like Red Cross that comes in when there's a fire in the building or
Probably
tornadoes or those kinds of things?
People here that can answer that question than me if it's a, an emergency situation.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, there's plenty of people here that work for the city that probably could answer that question. What's available? I don't know. When on the south side, there was money showed up down there, so I don't know.
Okay, thanks.
I wish I was a millionaire, but I'm not.
Can staff speak to that? Like ultimately what happens in that sense?
I can't, Kingsley, can you speak in?
Can staff speak to that? Like ultimately what would happen in that sense? I mean, water and sewer would, be, done or whatever the case may be, and what would be the next step?
They wouldn't be habitable units
right.
At that time, and we would try to connect them with social service programs, probably do our best to connect them into those existing programs, but I can't say whether they would qualify for those existing programs or even be interested in them themselves.
Sorry.
Yeah, and I'd also tell you that the notice period for on the mobile home lots themselves is typically 30 days. They're usually month to month.
Okay.
All right, can we return to the question I asked? Are you inclined to support the commission's recommendations? Just to, I'll respond to my own question, and this gets to the point I was referring to, Eleanor. I noticed that the assistance that the city, the city required the developer to provide back in 1994 with regard to the Towncrest Mobile Home Court as part of a rezoning was $2,000 per trailer. Well, I'm sorry, it was $150,000, and there were something like 66 units out there. So I don't know, it turns out to be something like $2,300 in 1994 dollars per trailer. So that's a pretty good precedent, it seems to me. I don't know what $2,300 in 1994 dollars translates to in terms of 2018 dollars. I'd be curious to know that. But I'd be inclined to support that as a condition on rezoning. That's what I was asking about, Eleanor, whether that would be the kind of thing that would require a consult and and I assume Ross would have to agree to that and so on.
I would say that would not require a consult because the condition that was imposed by the Planning and Zoning Commission was a minimum of $1,000. So I don't think that's a change from the conditions that they imposed. The question is whether it's agreeable to the applicant.
Yeah, are there any experts here in translating 1994 dollars into 2018 dollars? Yeah,
if I had my financial calculator, I could do it.
3888.
8880.
It's a lot higher than that. You're talking 22 years. What kind of interest rate are you using? It's going to be at least
This is just according to the worldwide Google inflation calculator.
Okay. Well, I think you're going to be at least double. I think you're going to be at least 4,600, 5,000 probably. I would say this. I think the Towncrest project was a much larger project. With a corporation with deep pockets that could do that sort of thing. I think, as Ross has indicated, this is a very small parcel with relatively few units, and to suggest that they would have the ability to pay on that same scale, I don't think is reasonable. I'm willing to go ahead and support what P&Z has approved.
Ross, if you come up with a number out there, it would be helpful for us in this conversation. You know, $2,318. I mean, just the number, that's all I'm trying to pin down.
The number that we came up with was the $3,800, and we would be unable to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I would, I'd be comfortable moving forward with what planning and zoning proposed. And it's not about, so I'm being honest with you, I'm going to deviate a little bit because this is not necessarily focused on the design or building or whatever it is. It's really focused on the relocation assistance. I do feel very uncomfortable right here making judgments on what particular relocation amount should be provided. I say for me in this sense, and there's a couple of, I guess, let me start off with the process. And ultimately, I see this as a problematic property that absent us moving forward or absent the developer, I see a really problematic situation where nobody wins. And frankly, I hate that proposal. I see an opportunity that I'm not necessarily in love with from, again, focusing on the relocation assistance, not focused on the building. That I'm not absolutely in love with, but ultimately I'm worried about, again, potentially not moving forward and absent guidelines that I think that we've clearly vetted. Imposing something on the developer that, you know, again, is kind of throwing a dart into the air and not necessarily knowing where it will land. I mean, if another project comes up and that developer says I can only do 500 or 3,000 or 6,000, I don't like the kind of hodgepodge nature of kind of where we're at from this standpoint. I appreciate the planning and zoning going through their deliberation and coming up with some type of number for us to at least have discussion on. But I would feel comfortable moving forward. I mean, this is an unfortunate situation. I mean, I don't think that that's not a part of my thought process. I do think this makes me think as we, you know, I would say that initially, and I would, you know, potentially kind of upset about my naivete from, you know, looking at the Rose Oak situation and saying, you know, we've made a statement. This is, I remember Susan bringing up the fact of precedent and how we're going to move forward on this. And now we're looking at another project where we're talking about relocation assistance. And I'm worried about the fact that we didn't set a standard. And maybe we should have thought of that beforehand. So there's some type of standard that can be used. I do understand that there's not necessarily the need for a standard, but I do want us to have some type of thing that we would be looking at from that framework, or the developer can look at from that framework to have these conversations. Because while I agree with Charlie's comments in relation to the Forest View project or in relation to larger scale projects, I do feel like this is a different project. And the footprint is a lot different. And so because of that, I feel a lot more comfortable in that, you know, smaller dollar amount than I would moving forward. The other piece of it is I do agree with I do like the adequate time to move, the 9 months. I appreciate that, again, availability to elongate the stay for residents who are, you know, going to have some substantial financial and moving problems, as we all have, trying to figure out where they're going to live, especially at this time of year. So I'm supportive.
So, Kingsley, just to be clear, there's nothing in the code indicating what kind of relocation assistance we should apply or anything. So what I was trying to do is find a precedent. We found a precedent, and the precedent is Town Crest in 1994. And
to that
so
point,
that's the reason I tried to tag it to that precedent.
When I agreed with that, I mean, I like the fact that you did that. My issue with it is the footprint. I mean, I think that's a different footprint. And I think that if that's what we're trying to tag it to, we need to have that conversation well in advance and just general discussion around relocation assistance. I don't want us to just come up with it now.
Okay, so remember, we're trying to figure out whether we agree with the commission or not.
Well, one question I have is with that comment I made regarding the refinement of the concept related to the the building design. Eleanor, is asking for a house type of building along the Prairie du Chien frontage something that, if the applicant, if Ross were to agree to that, would that require going through the process again?
I think you'd probably want to offer the consult in that case. You'd certainly have to continue the public hearing anyway, so you might as well offer the consult, because we don't have a CZA that says that, and the CZA has to be signed before the close of the public hearing.
I guess, can we comment a little bit in terms of what we want to do? I would like to say no for now. I would like to have the consult. I guess I don't care if we set a precedent for relocation assistance, because I look at this as, in terms of the city paying part of it, I'd like to further evaluate that into the future. This is economic development. I think this would be good for the city of Iowa City if this were rezoned and this were redeveloped. I think absolutely. But why should the residents bear almost the entire aspect of this redevelopment? We give economic assistance in all sorts of ways. We give it for facade improvements. We give direct payments to structures. We give upfront TIFs in the multi-millions of dollars. Those are different projects, and we have reasons to do that. I don't think there's any problem with us setting some sort of precedent for direct assistance to match what the developer. I take Ross at his word in terms of the margins aren't that high. I think this would give us a lot more time to be able to evaluate this. But I would like to vote no. I'd like to have the consult. And at our next meeting on the 3rd, I'd like for us to have a discussion with staff input as to whether we could match a certain portion of what the relocation assistance is. I don't see why we can't do that. We give money out in all sorts of contexts for needs that aren't as important as this. This is housing. We give it for facade. We give it for structural improvements to people that aren't nearly the same financial situation that these folks are. Why can't we? And these don't happen every day. You had mentioned 1994. I don't necessarily think that we're opening up the spigots to the city budget. This particular unit is, we're talking about, 10 units. We're not talking about a huge amount of money here. So that's what I'd like to do, is vote no, have the consult, and then at our next meeting, have a discussion with staff about whether we could help match some of this. Because then we get into that potentially $4,000 to $5,000 number, which I'm a lot more comfortable with.
I'm going to go against the grain a little bit here, because I agree with a lot of what you're saying, Rockne, but I think that could be a separate discussion amongst us to increase that or match it, because I think, having been married to a plumber, the thought of the sewer system collapsing and failing just makes me cringe. So I think that we're kind of on a timeline here and on the clock, and the sooner we can make this decision, the better. And I think that P&Z gave some very great conditions to this, and of which they are addressing the need for the housing relocation and the building height and the design review, the outdoor amenities. I think they're addressing those, and I think as far as the time limit goes, we need to move on this.
I like Pauline's suggestion. I don't see much merit in having a consult, Rockne, because I don't know what we would talk to the commission about. The point really has to do with how large the relocation assistance should be and who's going to pay it. And I don't think that's really a conversation that we need to talk to the commission about. So what I am inclined to do is support the proposed rezoning. And I asked Ross about design of the building. I think I heard very clearly that they'll make sure the building on Prairie du Chien is compatible with the other houses along that road. That's important. And we can have the conversation you suggested.
So we would be able to still have the conversation then July 3rd or in August about whether we would do that.
Sure, it's up to us, yeah. But that'd be separate.
Because I mean, just for record purposes, I definitely want us to have that conversation.
Yeah, just separate from the rezoning, yeah. So are there at least 4? Yeah, okay, so we don't want to consult with the commission. All right. Anybody else want to address this and the public hearing? I'm going to close the public hearing. Could I have a motion, please, for first consideration?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Boschway, seconded by Mims. Discussion.
So I did want to make sure I brought up, so I would be in favor of what Pauline said. I mean, ultimately, I think Pauline articulated it a lot more cleanly and succinctly as far as I'm just worried about this property. And ultimately, if it gets to the point where it's, the water and sewer is done, I mean, there's ultimately nothing then the residents would be given. I just don't like that proposal at all. So, yeah, I mean, I'd be generally interested in, moving forward on this particular consideration. And then, if council's interested in having that conversation, I think that's along the lines as far as standards and discussion, because I do think a precedent would be set, Rock, and I actually disagree a little bit, because ultimately, if I was a developer in a bigger complex, I would say, well, you did this for the small development, why wouldn't you be willing to do it for a larger development where more residents would be associated? I'm not saying it's a problematic discussion to have. I just think that I want some standards or some type of conversation around it. I would also tell you that Maz would agree with Mr. Eastham, Charlie's statement around kind of the relocation assistance. She's not here, but she had texted me that a little bit different number than I think Charlie was looking at, but relocation assistance of up to $5,000 reimburse actual moving costs. The developer must agree to purchase at appraised value any mobile homes that cannot be moved due to their age or condition, and then residents who move to another trailer park are to receive lot rental assistance equal to the difference between their current lot rent and the lot rent in a new location for a period of at least 3 years. And so just a little bit off the number, but I think in general along the lines of what
If you want to see what that relocation plan is, it was part of the comprehensive, it was part of the record in the comprehensive plan amendment. I'm not certain that's completely accurate.
And I'm not saying it is, I'm just stating what I got from Maj from that standpoint.
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
Well, I think one of the reasons to go back to planning and zoning is I think the developer can do a little bit more. So if we could have that conversation with planning and zoning, I think that would allow us the opportunity to do that. So
Planning and zoning's condition was a minimum of 1,000. They were not interested in having further discussion about that. So I think it's pretty clear that.
Yes, and just to clarify, planning and zoning did not come up with 1,000. They asked the applicant to come up with a relocation plan, and he put on the table 1,000, and they recommended a minimum of 1,000, and then on to you.
Okay, I think we're ready to vote. Roll call, please.
Mims?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Botchway?
Yes.
Cole?
no.
Motion carries 5-1. Cole in the negative.
Mayor, can I have some clarification on your expectations for the next agenda, work session agenda? It sounds like, do you want to have an item there to discuss city assistance?
I don't know if it has to be on the next work session, but soon. But it's about whether the city should provide some form of relocation assistance for situations similar to this and this one.
Okay.
And we do have at least 3 council members who want to do that.
I think so.
Yes, I do.
So I'll make sure that's our policy.
Okay, moving on to item 6C, rezoning Camp Cardinal Boulevard and Deer Creek Road, The Grove. This is an ordinance conditionally rezoning approximately 7.84 acres from interim development research development park IDRP zone to planned development overlay, low density multifamily OPD RM12 zone located west of Camp Cardinal Boulevard and east of Deer Creek Road. This is second consideration, but the applicant has requested expedited action.
I move that the rule requiring the ordinances must be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to the meeting at which it is to be finally passed be suspended, that the second consideration and vote be waived, and that the ordinance be voted on for final passage at this time.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Thomas. Discussion.
I'm against expediting this. Planning and zoning certainly took their time considering this development, expressing many concerns, some of which were resolved for them. And as John pointed out the last time, there were over 68 pages in our packet of documentation on this issue. So I think for us to condense it and not take another meeting to thoroughly think about this issue would not be good.
I would disagree. I think P&Z took, I don't know, 4 or 5 meetings to get through this. They thoroughly vetted it. I think put a lot of extra requirements on the developer beyond what is in our design things, and we've talked about for legitimate reasons, and I've expressed my concern about what that means in terms of standards for developers and what they can expect. But having said that, P&Z went through all of that, which means this has been delayed significantly by the number of meetings that it took to get through P&Z. We've had an opportunity to look at it, and I don't believe we've had anybody come to us against it. No. And usually, if something has been controversial, and we've had a number of people from the public who were against something, then we've been more inclined to not do the expedited. But when we haven't had that situation, when we've had no one speaking against it, and it's been thoroughly vetted by P&Z, we've certainly had the opportunity. We've had materials for at least 3 weeks in terms of looking at this. Then I see no reason not to go ahead for the benefit of the developer. We're talking that we're in construction season that's limited in the state of Iowa, and to get this moving so that they can do what they need to do during this construction season, I think is important.
And I think we like the changes that P&Z made, so.
Correct.
Anyone else? Well, I'll say last time I voted against the proposal. It passed 6-1. I'm inclined to vote no again, but I don't see any reason to oppose the condensation of the readings. So I'll vote in favor of the condensing of readings.
It will take 6 of you to condense.
Oh, would? Okay. Well, that would have to be unanimous then.
The 6 of you here, yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, we'll find out. So roll call, please.
Taylor?
No.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Botchway?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Motion fails on a 5-1 vote. Yeah. All right, so now we need a motion for second consideration.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Botchway. Discussion.
I think this is another.
I was just going to say the only issue I have with the not condensing, I don't know, can we talk about not condensing it now? The only issue I have with the not condensing it is our meeting structure.
Yeah, we don't meet again until
we don't have a
July
meeting
3rd.
until July 3rd.
This sets people back a month in a short construction season in Iowa. When people wonder why developers and people in this community call this an anti-growth, anti-business council, these are the kinds of votes that do it. There's no reason not to condense this so they can get moving on this. There's been no action come to this council that people are against it. As Rockne said, we agreed with a lot of the changes that P&Z made. I expressed my concerns about that process, but they were good changes. It was the process I was talking about. And we don't meet for another month. And you've got a 6 to 7 to 8 month window in Iowa, depending on weather, and they can't do anything unless we have a special meeting. They can't do anything until after July 3rd. There's just no reason.
I'd voted yes last time, but I erroneously did. I meant to vote no because I still have concerns regarding this development and just the location and some of the plans surrounding it. And I think that some of my fellow council members really didn't look very thoroughly at this. They're considering it as affordable and suitable for families. And I didn't see anywhere in these plans that it's going to be affordable as such. It may be more affordable than, say, the Camp Cardinal, Kennedy Parkway area or the Galway Hills. But who do you want it to be affordable for? I would like to see what the affordability is. And I just didn't hear it described that way, and I just don't, it doesn't seem to be family-friendly area. Yes, I know Rockne last time had mentioned it's great to see development in that area, but who's it being developed for? I know Eleanor said we can't ask, what market you're building this for, but it mentioned folks that perhaps work at the hospital or commute to Cedar Rapids, work up in Cedar Rapids. I don't see this as lower income type folks that are going to be living there, and that's what I would like to see, more of an truly affordable units there. And I'm concerned about the pond. They're talking about families. The pond is very close. There's no protection for that. I just don't see it as a very good area for development.
And Pauline, maybe those comments were towards me as far as the affordability piece. I think when I think about affordability, I don't do a good enough job as far as clarifying kind of the definition of affordability that I may be using in regards to particular projects. In general, I try to clarify that by asking more questions related around, who this is for and the 80% median income that I know we have tied, 80% of the median income that I know we have tied to certain properties. When I say general affordability, I'm focused on the nature of the varying types of diverse housing types that could lead to just general affordability. I mean, I would tell you that even some of the people at the university you spoke about are priced out of our market without the level of varying housing types. And so I would agree with you, it's not necessarily affordable from the definition as we see from low-income workers and families that I think we need housing in this area for. But in general, when I think about affordability and having different housing types so people don't have to buy a $300,000 home, that's what I think about.
What are you folks going to do?
I'm supporting it, and I would like to have a special meeting. I don't know if that's a separate topic, but
Special meeting about what?
for third consideration.
Oh.
So I just raised that.
Oh, I see. All right, so I think we should have a roll call. Roll call, please.
Taylor?
No.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
No.
Botchway?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Motion carries 4-2. Could I have a motion to accept correspondence, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Botchway, second by Mims. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. There is a suggestion about having a special session, special meeting about this particular topic during third consideration. Are there 4 people who would support doing that?
Yes.
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 I would. I just don't know if I have the time, but I would.
Well, I certainly can do it. Can we set up a time?
We'll try.
You got to be here.
I may have to call in.
I mean, I'm being literal because it's
No,
a
I'm
4
saying
to 2 vote.
Yeah,
So
so
if
I may
you're
have to
gone,
call. Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I may have to call in just because I may
we
travel.
make sure that if you want to go through, so.
Okey doke, so we'll set that special meeting up. I think we can move on to item 6D, rezoning historic landmark designation, 410 to 412 North Clinton Street. This is an ordinance rezoning property located at 410 to 412 North Clinton from high-density multifamily residential, RM44, to RM44 with a historic preservation overlay, RM44/OHP. This is second consideration, but the property owners have requested deferral and have proposed an agreement to extend the moratorium during the period of deferral. I wonder if, is there any elaboration that we require from staff about this? But I should get a motion on the table, I guess. A motion to defer?
Well,
I don't know, how should I phrase this? It's pretty
I
vague.
think the developer's attorney was going to
Michael, do you want to speak to us?
approach you about it.
Yes, please. It's not on the table yet, though, is it?
No, but it does, you only have to make the motion if you're inclined to do that.
Ah, right. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Bob Michael. As you may recall, I represent the owner. That's fine. Happens all the time. I represent the owners of 410, 412 North Clinton. They're recent purchasers of the property, and I don't want to go back and rehash what the previous owner said and what I had said, but the historic overlay would have significant effect on the property and their ability to develop the property. And And as Bob Miklo had talked about the Tate Arms House and the ability in the Riverfront Crossings District, if a property receives a historic landmark designation, the owner can take the development rights for that property and transfer it somewhere else within the Riverfront Crossing District. My client has asked me to ask you for a deferral of consideration of the historic landmark designation for the North Clinton property to give the staff an opportunity to come up with a change to your city code, have an ordinance, which would allow the same type of thing if it's not in the Riverfront Crossing District. And this would allow, if you should pass such an ordinance, would allow then the property owner to transfer the development rights from the Clinton Street property to a different property, which would lessen the impact of having the property designated as a historic landmark. And of course, I knew parties that were in support of designating Clinton Street as a historic landmark would want to make sure that my clients couldn't do anything during this period of deferment. And I came up with the agreement and submitted it to Eleanor, and I believe she's okay with the wording of the agreement, and it's been signed by my clients with the blank date on when you would defer it to, just to hold everything as in a status quo until that deferment date comes up, and allow staff, if you should so direct them, to consider an ordinance which would allow them to transfer development rights. And I would be happy to assist city staff. They probably have other things to do. If I could be of some help or assistance to them to come up with some language or similar ordinances which would speed the process along, I would be happy to do so. So what we're requesting is a deferral of your action tonight and authorize the mayor to execute the agreement that I've drafted, which would allow the moratorium to continue during the period of deferment, and then also direct the staff to look into developing an ordinance which would allow property owners that have properties designated a historic landmark to transfer their development rights to other properties, which I understand the Historic Preservation Commission may be in favor of such an ordinance, and that the city staff is open to that type of ordinance. So if you have any questions, be happy to answer them for you.
If we landmarked, maybe this is for Eleanor, I don't know, if we landmarked, we could still develop an ordinance in which we would retroactively allow the transfer of development rights, or would we? You understand what I'm saying there? I mean, so if we landmark tonight and we pass an ordinance in the future, would we be then able to still say, hey, we will allow you to transfer the development rights on the property? I mean, so my question is, what's the advantage of delaying as opposed to landmarking now, getting in that in hand, and then doing it, if that makes sense?
I think you still could, but you haven't committed to that, and so there very likely may be an appeal to district court of the designation.
But maybe not.
But maybe not.
Yeah.
It also does not look like you're going to landmark it tonight, because it takes 6 out of 7 of you, and I think Councilmember Mims is a no vote.
So I was just going to ask that. So with Mazahir gone?
Yeah, it takes 6 members of the council. Okay. So it will take all 6 of you to landmark this tonight.
It won't happen because I won't support it. So if we vote, then we're done with it?
If there's a no vote, we're done with it, yeah.
So then we almost have to.
So should
we could defer third consideration. We could defer the pass and adopt motion to a meeting after Mazahir returns.
This is second consideration tonight.
No, it's third, isn't it? It says it's second? I'm sorry. Well, we could defer second consideration till, I don't know what Maz's schedule is, but something like August. I mean, just as an alternative, that we could do that, correct?
Yep.
All right.
But the moratorium expires on June 2nd.
Yeah.
On June, what did you say again?
If we don't defer, June 2nd.
Now, if we defer, the moratorium still, if we defer in the way I just described, the moratorium still ends in June, whatever it is. Yeah.
Correct.
But isn't that their request, is to defer so that they could extend the moratorium? What am I missing here?
That's subject to an agreement. I think the mayor was just talking about a simple deferral until Mazahir returns.
Yeah, what I was inclined to do, Rockne, is vote tonight on second consideration. But now I see there are consequences associated with doing that. But that's what I was inclined to do. And then instruct the staff to do exactly what Bob Michael has asked us to do, which is investigate the viability of adopting a TDR, transfer of development rights ordinance, that would apply to this site and to similar sites.
That would require the consent,
But,
So I propose that we agree with Bob for tonight.
I think what we need is a motion. I don't know, do you have anything to add to this conversation?
Well, I just want to make sure if you send us down the path of transfer of development rights, you have to be comfortable with the fact that those development rights will lead to taller buildings in whatever placement area we pick. So it's one thing to grant development rights, it's another thing to receive them. And I just want you to give that a little bit of thought before you send us down that path, because it's going to be a time-intensive process to develop a TDR ordinance and to vet that with Historic Preservation, Planning and Zoning Commission, and ultimately the council. So again, if you think about the mechanics of riverfront crossings, you transfer those development rights within that district. That district can be bigger or smaller. I've said to a few of you, I don't sense that the council would want those development rights to transfer in the north side area or perhaps even the downtown. I don't know if you'd be comfortable transferring those in the Riverfront Crossings District. So to me, that's something that you need to give some thought to tonight is, are you willing to allow for higher density than what the underlying zoning code would allow in some part of town that would be of interest to any developer?
If we reject it tonight, though, which it seems like will happen, the moratorium on demolition will expire June 2nd.
Yep.
In which case, by the time she gets back, it could be done.
Yep. I wonder, Bob, whether you would be willing to ask us to defer extending the moratorium, but not include in that deferral, have it a short-term deferral, so that what we would instruct the staff to do is report back to us about the what would be involved in adopting a TDR ordinance applying to situations like this, what the key issues would be. And I can think of two. One is what Jeff alluded to. It's called receiving areas. Where would be the receiving areas? And the second would be what fraction of the property value would an owner like the one you're representing want to transfer? You know, the whole value of all the property, or just the value of the building and behind, and what could be developed there, or what? I mean, I don't know. I think that would be an issue we'd have to get at. So I'd be pretty eager to instruct the staff to report back to us within a pretty short period of time. We could define that, you know, like 1 month or 2 months, some mutually agreeable time, so that we'd have a sense of what we'd actually be doing. And then if we agree that we want to adopt an ordinance, then we could say, okay, we would agree with you beyond, you know, to defer for another, I don't know, 6 months or whatever's required to develop an ordinance. But I don't think we're in a position to say we want to develop a TDR ordinance right here, right now.
Can I have a moment?
Sure.
This is an interesting council meeting. This is an interesting council meeting.
If you, I would assume it would take 6 months at least to pass such an ordinance, maybe 9 months, something like that. If we just do the period of deferment for 6 or 9 months, I mean, nothing changes. They can't do anything with the property. I mean, everything is, I don't know that there's any benefit to only making it 2 months and then extending it for another 4 months or 5 months or whatever. Can we just do the 6 or the 9 months now?
Would we have a mutual understanding that by agreeing to defer for 6 to 9 months, the council would not be committing itself to adopting a TDR ordinance?
That is correct.
The agreement does not include a commitment to a TDR ordinance.
You may decide that's not appropriate, and that's fine. And then you go to your second consideration then at whatever date you pick for the date of deferment. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like the thing we ought to do. So we don't have a motion on the floor.
Could we read the motion so we know
I'd
what we're
suggest a
moving?
motion to approve the agreement as signed and presented by the developer, and to defer until.
And I think we should pick a date of a meeting and insert that on the agreement and
Yeah. I don't even know that we need a date of a meeting. I think we can say 6 months from today, and then we'll make sure and be at a meeting before that happens.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 6 months from today.
I would suggest 8 months. I think with this type of ordinance, not only is the staff going to have to work to pull together, but we would probably start at historic preservation and get their input, and then go to P&Z and then to council. So there's an extra step in there with historic preservation review.
Bob, would that be acceptable to the owner?
The 8 months?
Yeah.
Yes, it would. I just need to make sure that our agreement to be subject to the moratorium expires when you folks consider it for the final consideration. I don't want our moratorium to extend on our appeal rights after the third consideration.
Right, no, I
clear with
think,
you?
let me just look at it for a minute. No, the moratorium by agreement only extends to the date of deferral.
Okay. So.
Okay, so we're in agreement.
Yep.
Could you please restate the motion for us, please?
Motion to approve the agreement for extension of the moratorium and deferral for a period of 8 months as executed by the developer, and to defer for 8 months from today's date.
Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Botchway, second by Cole. Discussion?
I'm going to vote no, simply because I would prefer to take the vote tonight. I've already indicated my feeling in terms of when a property owner protests something like this, and the property owner's rights. So I'll be voting no on the deferral.
Sure. Any other discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Botchway?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
No.
Taylor?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-1. Item 7, University Sale, 717 East Davenport.
Jim, I'm sorry, there's a correspondence
Oh,
to accept.
sorry. Could I have a motion to accept correspondence, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Botchway, second by Taylor. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7, University Sale, 717 East Davenport. This is a resolution authorizing conveyance of a single-family home located at 717 East Davenport Street. I'll open the public hearing. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing.
Move the resolution.
Second.
Moved by Thomas, second by Botchway. Discussion? I walk by it every day. I'm glad to see it. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Botchway?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Item 8, fiscal year 19, aid to agency. This is a resolution allocating human services aid to agencies funding for the fiscal year 19, July 1, 2018 through June 30, 2019. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Botchway, second by Thomas. Discussion. Tracy, you want to help us out here?
Hi, I'm Tracy, Neighborhood and Development Services Director. Aid agencies is that fund that you allocate funds, and we go through the joint funding process. So that means public service agencies apply to the United Way joint funding process. During that process, they apply for United Way, Johnson County, and the cities of Iowa City and Coralville funds. HCDC had that application round. We allocated funds in January, but it's an estimate when we do it in January. Those funds are made up of $250,000 from your general fund, $28,700 utility user funds, and approximately $100,000 in CDBG funds. We received good news after we allocated our original allocation. In early May, we were notified by HUD that our CDBG allocation, our entitlement, increased by more than 16%. Our home funds increased by more than 36%. So that forced HCDC to review the applications again and allocate an additional $16,000. So instead of just going to $100,000, we went to the maximum allowed under the CDBG rules. So we allocated that $16,000. So HCDC recommended that those funds go to Prelude Behavioral Services, their organization in Iowa City that provides substance abuse treatment and mental health services. So that was the recommendation. So it's the same recommendation you looked at with the addition of $16,000 for Prelude. Any questions about that? I know it's late, so I try to be brief.
Well done. Any questions for Tracy?
Just glad to hear this.
Thank
It's a good
you.
problem to have. Always more money.
Any council discussion?
Yeah, I would piggyback on what Pauline said. I'm glad to see money going to Prelude. I think I'm interested at some point in having a discussion. I think there was something in the packet here too somewhere about we have agencies who have been longtime recipients of this money, and they absolutely depend on this for their ongoing operations. So I'm really concerned when the commission starts, while on the one hand, it's nice to be able to look at new agencies or organizations, but we have long-time organizations that are doing great work in this community that we can't just all of a sudden cut out $15,000, $18,000, $20,000. So I think we need to make that message clear. I think Tracy's aware of that, and they've had some of that discussion.
The commission is, I can address, right? Sure. The commission is going to form a subcommittee and look at how we can provide stable fundings to core agencies. It used to be really difficult to be a new aid agency. So now we're going to look at that process about how we balance, how we provide stable funding with an opportunity for new agencies to come on board. We don't know what that'll be, but we are looking at it. We're looking into that right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an important topic. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Botchway?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Item 9, approval of the CDBG home budget. This is a resolution adopting Iowa City's fiscal year 19 annual action plan, which is a subpart of Iowa City's 2016 through 2020 consolidated plan, otherwise known as City Steps. Let me open public input. Oh, it's you again.
Hi. We went through the same process a little. Well, we took applications in January. The commission reviewed those applications, did a question and answer session in February. In March, we made a funding recommendation, which you guys saw in the HCDC minutes. Got the increased funding. So we had an extra $51,000 that we could spend on CDBG eligible activities. That $51,000 was HCDC recommended that to go to the Arthur Street Healthy Life Center. In the original funding application, they were not funded. HCDC made a recommendation for the council to look at tax abatement. After talking with the applicant, they need their $50,000 now, not over 10 years, and it was not something probably that might be that the council might approve for a for-profit entity to get tax abatement over a certain amount of years. So they allocated $51,000 for that project. That'll be a project on Arthur Street that provides a nurse practitioner type of model in providing mental health and just general health services. So nurse practitioner can treat both mental health and physical ailments like diabetes, asthma, sinus infections, stuff like that. Then with those home funds, we also had an increase in home funds with a repayment from Builders of Hope that increased our home pot quite substantially. So we have about $185,000. We can't do this in CDBG, but in CDBG we allocated that money, to Prelude with CDBG funds and to public facilities for that $51,000 for Arthur Street. In home, there's a category called other housing activities. We're going to put that, or what we're proposing is putting that $185,000 at other housing activities, then immediately starting a funding round for people to apply. It goes through HUD, gets approved. We have to have this annual action plan to HUD by June 30th, but we can put that category in, and so that means we do a funding round. It go through HCDC, it go through council, and then we can proceed with those projects. So you would have probably a funding recommendation back like in August for those funds. Any questions?
Yeah.
No, thanks. Here's a question.
So, in general, and this is somewhat Maz's comment as well, that I'm question/comment that I'm supportive of, is going back to the notes here in relation to the projects being proposed at Taylor and Davis. Can you speak to some of the concerns that were brought up during that time and kind of what the thought process is in moving forward on that particular project?
Okay. The city applied for those funds in order to do a university-esque type project on Taylor and Davis. A lot of the same reasons for the university of why we target the university to the nuisance complaints, neighborhood stabilization are apparent in the Taylor and Davis neighborhoods. So staff applied for that $100,000 to do 4 units, 2 duplexes. The concerns were raised during HCDC meetings and one neighborhood resident about fear of displacing people of color in those 2 duplex units. If we're providing homebuyer counseling, if we're providing relocation assistance, will it have a negative impact on the neighborhood? Is rental rehabilitation a better use of funds? So there's a lot of concerns, and HCDC recommended that we do a racial equity analysis before we proceed. So our intent was to have that done before July 1st, when technically funds become available through this pot of money.
Thank you, Tracy.
I'm Charlie Eastham again, 953 Canton Street. I'm a member of the Housing Community Development Commission, and I opposed the project Tracy's just describing, the City of Iowa City South District Partnership, which is a project which will be included in your draft FY19 Annual Action Plan. And I just want to just inform you that the commission did agree to ask the staff to make a racial equity impact analysis for that specific project for many of the reasons that Tracy just informed you about. So I hope that when that equity impact analysis is completed, the commission will have a chance to review it, and you'll consider that when this comes back before you in making a decision about whether this particular project should go forward or not.
Thank you, Charlie. Anyone else? Seeing no one else, I'm going to close this public input. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So, second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Botchway. Discussion.
Yeah, in particular, I mean, I just brought up that concern around the racial equity, review toolkit, because, obviously it's a concern, especially in that particular neighborhood. I'm glad that the staff's looking into that, and that will be reviewed again by us before the project. Is that correct?
And once we finish the analysis, we'll bring that back.
Okay.
Whether, I don't know what format, if it's a work session or a council memo, but yes, it'll come back.
We'd probably just put it in the info packet and we wouldn't proceed with the program until, until the next meeting and you had a chance to comment on it. Thanks. Give us direction at that time.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Botchway?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes, motion carries 6-0. Item 10, landfill dual extraction system construction. It's what Ron Kanucky's been waiting for all night. This is a resolution approving plans, specifications, form of agreement, and estimate of cost for the construction of the landfill dual extraction system construction project, establishing amount of bid security to accompany each bid, directing the city clerk to post notice to bidders, and fixing time and place for receipt of bids. I'll open the public hearing. Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Thomas, second, well, it's a motion to approve, I should have said that. Seconded by Botchway. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Botchway?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Item 11, Creekside Park Improvements 2018. This is a resolution approving plans, specifications, form of agreement, and estimate of cost for the construction of the Creekside Park Improvements 2018 project, establishing amount of bid security to accompany each bid, directing city clerk to post notice to bidders, and fixing time and place for receipt of bids. I'll open the public hearing. Zach, it was great seeing you run up to the podium there.
Zachary Hall, Superintendent of Parks. Before you is the plans and specs for the Creekside Park redevelopment. In them, you'll notice the master plan that Snyder and Associates did, and we've refined that to our construction documents to go out for bid. In the base bid package, we're looking at community gardens, which we've been working with Backyard Abundance on as far as plans and specs for that. And new basketball court, new shelter, restroom, playground area, new trail system, parking primarily for the garden area, and then creek access. So that's the design for the new playground. This playground is fully accessible as far as ramps and transfer stations and units within it. So this was something that we moved forward at council's request and community members' requests as well. And the shelter system that we are looking at is a ROMTech system, which is used in the national park and state park system. And our alternates for this project, the first two alternates, 1 and 2, are specific to the facades of the shelter restroom. So the first of is the split face block at the base. The second is limestone veneer at the base. The third alternate is, limestone veneer on the second, and then limestone for creek access is the third alternate. Alternate 4 is site amenities such as grills, benches, and then the 5th is for the contracted installation of the playground. And timeline, setting public hearing, hold a public hearing, and then bid letting in June, and so forth. So I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
I'm not hearing any.
Okay.
Looks good.
Thank you, Zach. Would anybody else like to address this topic? Seeing no one else, I'll close the public hearing. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Botchway, seconded by Mims. Discussion. I'm very pleased to see this. I look forward to seeing the park constructed. It'll be a great additional asset for the Creekside neighborhood. Very pleased to see it. Further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes?
Botchway?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Item 12, Melrose Avenue Fiber Optic Extension. This is a resolution approving plan specifications, form of agreement, and estimate of cost for the construction of the Melrose Avenue Fiber Optic Extension, establishing amount of bid security to accompany each bid, directing city clerk to post notice to bidders, and fixing time and place for receipt of bids. I'll open the public hearing. Seeing no one, I'm going to close the public hearing. Could I have a motion to approve?
Move the resolution.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Botchway. Discussion. Hearing none, roll call, please.
Mims?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes?
Botchway?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Item 13, Mormon Trek Boulevard 4-lane to 3-lane conversion and lighting improvements. This is a resolution approving plan specifications, form of agreement, and estimate of cost for the construction of the Mormon Trek Boulevard 4-lane to 3-lane conversion and lighting improvements, establishing amount of bid security to accompany each bid, directing city clerk to post notice to bidders, and fixing time and place for receipt of bids. I'll open the public hearing. Hi, Scott, your turn.
Scott Silver, Senior Civil Engineer. Before we get into the details of the project, I just wanted to give a quick recap on the objective and purpose of the project. Given the number of collisions we've had within the corridor, staff determined that there's a need for a safety improvement. I just wanted to define what the corridor is. It's generally from Highway 1 to Melrose. That can be done through a 4-lane to 3-lane conversion, as we heard earlier this evening from Kent. I think we're in the range of 25% reduction in crashes is typically what to assume in a 4-lane to 3-lane conversion. With that, staff prepared a application for a traffic safety improvement program grant through the Iowa Department of Transportation. We were awarded a $500,000 grant. The DOT, in going through the grant review process, they do their own review and analysis to make sure that it's a good candidate, and they did think that it was a great candidate. So as a part of our design, we also wanted to be sure that it was the corridor, it makes sense to convert the corridor, so we did do a traffic analysis study. What we found from that analysis was the traffic volumes are within acceptable limits for 4-lane to 3-lane conversions. I think we're in the range of about 10,000 ADT. As Kent said earlier this evening, anything below 18,000 is typically good for 4-lane to 3-lane conversion. We have a minimal increase in corridor travel time, which is roughly 30 seconds. They actually do a travel time study, and they drive the corridor 10 different times for the peak periods of the day, and they came up with about 30 seconds of delay, so it's pretty insignificant. The intersection level of service is at a C or better for the current and future traffic, and the future traffic timeline was from up to 2040. So, and I think at 2040 we were still only at like around 15,000 ADT. So we're still well below that 18,000 ADT. And then a byproduct of the conversion is the additional pavement width can be utilized for on-street biking facilities. So getting into the details of the project, as I discussed, we're proposing a 4-lane to 3-lane conversion from West Side Drive to Melrose. We're proposing 10-foot wide lanes for northbound, southbound, 11-foot two-way left turn lane, and then a 7-foot buffered bike lane. And just to give you a breakdown, so from the curb, you've got a 6-inch curb, then you have a 5-foot bike lane, and then an 18-inch buffer between the travel lane and the bike lane. Additionally, we are doing, for the sidewalk ramps that are non-ADA compliant, we're replacing those. We are adding a northbound right turn lane at the Benton Street intersection. I included this graphic just to kind of show how this intersection lays out, but we have a through lane both northbound and southbound. Of course, we have the dedicated buffer bike lanes, and then we have a left turn lane, dedicated left turn lane for southbound Mormon Trek. Overall, continued on this, we're going to be doing some pavement patching. There's some sections of the pavement that need repair, and this is probably a good time to do that. We're replacing all the traffic signals within the corridor, Eric, Benton, and Walden Square. And then another thing that we're doing is some light pole replacements, and this is from Melrose north to the city limits. I have a picture shown there, so some of them are getting into pretty bad shape, so we thought we'd tag on this project and also include that within the project limits. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Back to the safety issue, what is the projected reduction in accidents involving an injury or fatality? Do you have that information?
I don't have that information.
But in general, it's about a 15 to 25% for accidents. But in terms of a subcategory of accidents involving injury or death, we don't have that projection.
Right, exactly. So just for more information, I asked Kent and the MPO to give me the 2015 to 2017 crash history, and we're just between that time period, we're at 131 crashes. So we're kind of going up on that crash history. So getting those crashes down and doing some lane diet out there, I think would be good.
Could you remind us of what the anticipated construction schedule is?
So we would start construction, let's see here, we're going to accept bids at late June. We'll award at the next council meeting, and then start construction probably late July, with the intent of getting most of the work done except for the traffic signals completed yet this year. The traffic signal lead time on poles is astronomical. It's like 6 months to get poles right now. So we're pushing that off until the spring, but trying to get most of the 4 to 3 lane conversion done yet this fall.
Okay, great. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Scott?
Just a quick one. You mentioned, I think you did say this, and I talked to you about this, the left turn for southbound
Correct.
at Benton and Mormon Trek to turn left onto Benton.
Yep,
There will be a
left turn lane.
dedicated and dedicated light for that.
Yep.
Okay, good. And also then, we had talked about the concern with that convenience store that's there then, that has the 2 entrances. Is that going to be changed then?
No, they'll still have 2 entrances there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We would look to work with them if they ever redeveloped, but
at this point
we're not in a position to force a closure right now. They are, as you know, because you've seen a couple of those come and goes come before you, they are redoing a lot of their stores. We haven't been approached about this one in recent years. I think they approached us 3 or 4 years ago, but if and when they do, we'll look at those access points and try to clean that up a little bit.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Thank you, Scott.
You bet.
Would anybody else like to address this topic? I don't see anyone, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
Move the resolution.
Second.
Moved by Mem, seconded by Botchway. Discussion.
Living in this neighborhood, I don't doubt those crash numbers at all. There's constantly backup there, and primarily people waiting for the lights or rushing the light and not seeing the people coming over the hill. So I believe those crash numbers, and so this is a long time coming, and glad to see it.
Well, and for people out there watching that are worried about the impact on traffic flow, I mean, again, bears repeating that this is a DOT grant. There are Iowa Department of Transportation studies on the 4 to 3 conversion, so I think we'll get that traffic flow, plus we'll have the reduction in the safety. I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer in terms of the reduction of those accidents. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've said before, I mean, I agree with the safety element and the bike components, and so I'll be supportive. I would disagree with this particular area as far as traffic flow. I mean, again, the area to me is somewhat similar to, or was previously mentioned, somewhat similar to North Dodge, and the traffic there is awful at certain times. And so And that has actually a 35 to 45 speed limit to breeze through there. So I'll be interested to see the complaints and comments. I mean, I've already gotten some complaints, but I'd be interested to see the comments. The traffic, the safety piece of it is a no-brainer. So I mean, I'm generally supportive of that. But during certain times of the day, it's going to be heavy, packed, and you have a huge high school there. So there's some components that I'm pretty concerned about.
Fair enough. Any further discussion?
Just clarify one thing or reiterate one thing. When we had previously brought this to you, we were not looking at buffered bike lanes. They were just your traditional 5 or 6 foot bike lanes. They are now proposed to be buffered. We're working off the work session material from early April and really implementing what you saw in that work session, which is the 10-foot travel lanes, the 11-foot center turn, and then the 7-foot bike lane. So if you have been talking to people about this, understand or let them know that the bike lanes are given a little bit more and the traffic lanes are given a little bit less.
Well, thanks for highlighting that, Jeff. I think this is an interesting application of that idea where, where the traffic lane is adjacent to a bike lane, that provides float, basically, with respect to the traffic lane, especially when the bike lane is not occupied. So it's a good situation, I think, in terms of achieving that 10-foot traffic lane while allowing flexibility for the driver should they need more room.
Yep. Okay. No further discussion. Roll call, please.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Botchway?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Item 14, Ragbri, 1 temporary beverage garden. This is an ordinance amending Title IV entitled Alcoholic Beverages of the City Code to prohibit alcohol licenses for new or expanded outdoor areas during Ragbri, except for the downtown beverage garden, and to prohibit glass containers of alcohol. Oh, the sun's rising. What happened, Simon? And to prohibit glass containers of alcohol in the downtown beverage garden during Ragbri. This is second consideration, but staff has requested expedited action.
I move that the rule requiring the ordinances must be considered and voted on for passage at 2 council meetings prior to the meeting at which it is to be finally passed be suspended, that the second consideration and vote be waived, and that the ordinance be voted on for final passage at this time.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Taylor. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Taylor?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Botchway?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0.
Move final adoption.
Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Botchway. Discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Thomas?
Yes.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Botchway?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Mims?
Yes.
Taylor?
Yes.
Motion carries 6-0. Item 15, I don't know what the title of this actually is now. It's property acquisition. Do we have an official title? So this is a resolution approving the purchase agreement for 889 Park Place and 735 Manor Drive. Could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved. Second.
Moved by Mims, seconded by Botchway. Discussion. Yeah, Jeff,
Give
why
you a
don't
brief overview.
Provide that briefly.
This is 2 additional flood buyout properties in the Normandy Drive area. The addresses are 735 Manor and 889 Park Place. The proposal before you is to use local funds at $290,000 to acquire both of those units. In addition to that, the council should expect $20,000 to $30,000 in demo cost. for an all-in cost of removal of those structures of about $320,000 or so. This is a unique situation. We're recommending using local funds. All except one property that we've acquired in that area has relied on the majority federal funds and state funds with a small local match. We are recommending the purchase of these two with local funds because there are no state or federal funds available at the time, and they are both very close to City Park, and matter of fact, 889 Park Place is directly adjacent to City Park. So staff feels it's best to be opportunistic while these are available and to purchase them. The owner, it's the same owner that owns both of them, and they would like to sell them as a pair. So again, 735 Manor, 889 Park Place. The purchase price of $290,000 is roughly 91% of the current assessed value.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, any discussion, council members?
I just want to briefly comment. I am going to vote no. In part, it's because of the amount of money that we're spending here out of the Emergency Reserve Fund, coupled with the fact that these properties were acquired after the flood. So at least in my view, it's not a good use of city funds at this time.
Yeah, I'm going to support the resolution, partly because, for things Jeff mentioned, but the two properties are located immediately to the west of our current limits of City Park and are bounded by other buildings, or former sites of former buildings that are now potentially all included within the park. There's only one house left on that side of the street that will continue for a while. And the price seems to me to be reasonable for the houses, so I'm going to support it. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Throgmorton?
Yes.
Botchway?
Yes.
Cole?
No.
Mims? Yes. Taylor?
Yes.
Motion carries 5-1. Item 16, announcement of vacancies.
I don't know.
We have several to announce. We have one vacancy to fill a 4-year term on the Airport Commission. Wow, everybody's leaving. Danielle, thanks for sticking around. It's nice to see you again. We have 2 vacancies to fill 5-year terms on the Airport Zoning Board of Adjustment. 1 vacancy to fill a 3-year term on the Historic Preservation Commission for the East College Street District. 1 vacancy to fill a 3-year term on the Historic Preservation Commission for the Jefferson Street District. And 2 vacancies to fill 3-year terms on the Telecommunications Commission. Vacancies will remain open until filled. Gustav, do you want to address us in item 17, community comment? All right, go for it.
Yeah, so this isn't particularly university related, but I just wanted to mention 2 events I went to this past week. The first one is I got to go to Hamilton in Chicago.
Lucky you.
It was amazing. Definitely recommend, as you can draw parallels to like what we are currently going through nationally, and it was just great singing. And I loved it. And then I also went to the Renaissance Festival in the Manna Colonies, and would definitely recommend thinking about it for next year if you want to,
Thank you. All right, item 18, City Council information. Could we start with, Mazahir is not here, could we start with, Rockney and move to the right?
I had the fortune of meeting Jean-Paul Mugomuzi. He's one of the leaders in the Congolese community, and he reminded me that there is a World Refugee Day celebration here in Iowa City that will take place Saturday, June 16th, 2018 at the Pentecrust, and it will run from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Activities will include cultural dancing, African food, singing, speeches, community fellowship time, meeting with new friends. Had a great conversation with him the other day, and it's really fun. We talk a lot about our wonderful Sudanese community. As Jim, you've mentioned, though, we also have a growing and emerging Congolese community, and I think the numbers all are closely matching now with our Sudanese community. So we had a great conversation. I encouraged him to take advantage of community comments, so I think you probably will see him at one of our next meetings to talk about that. So that's pretty much it. I'll give an update in terms of our boards and commissions related to City of Literature at that time. Jim and I are doing the Civil Rights Tour with Henry Harper from June 16th through the 24th. One of our dates I'd like to really feature, though, is we're going to be meeting with the Birmingham mayor June 17th. I think it's going to be like June 17th through the 19th time period. It'll be essentially a full day of activities in connection with the Birmingham city officials related to that. So really exciting about that. And so related to that, too, I was also going to ask for council approval for at least 2 nights of that component, if the council has any objection to that. So, any objection?
Sorry, I must have been daydreaming. 2 nights of that component?
Well, I was just going to say to be reimbursed for those 2 nights that we're doing the trip.
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't have any objection. How about the rest of you?
No.
Okay.
Guess we're fine. Yeah. Sounds like we're good, Grok.
All right.
John?
Nothing.
Nothing.
Pauline?
I'd like to congratulate the Iowa City Community School District. I had the pleasure of attending their groundbreaking for their new elementary school there in North Liberty. So congrats to them, and congrats in selecting Dr. Christine Grant as the namesake for that school. She's certainly a wonderful person to have done that, and it was great to see her there and speaking. Let's see here. June 23rd, our block party. Can't forget that. People should be sure to go to that. June 2nd and 3rd, is nationwide Wear Orange event. People are encouraged to wear orange for the Moms Demand Action on Gun Sense, and they're having some events in collaboration with they'll be here at the Farmers Market as well as over at the College Green Park. So take a look at that and wear orange.
Kingsley.
Yeah, so I'll be at the event speaking at it. I hope should be interesting. I haven't wrote it yet or figured out what I was going to say, so show up. I think it's an important issue that needs to get talked more about. I also will be going to Pastor Smith Appreciation Celebration later on that evening at New Creations International Church, and many of you know Pastor Smith. He's come up a few times and talked around a variety of different issues, specifically in relation to different hate and rhetoric that's been, a part of our community, not necessarily maybe from our community members, but from abroad or within. Ultimately, doesn't matter for the fact of some of the things that are being said. I would also tell you that, in general, from a public standpoint, I've been a part of some interesting conversations in relation to our LGBTQ community, and I would say a very interesting and divisive rhetoric around support for LGBTQ community, and I just think it's unfortunate, and it's frightening that these things have been kind of allowed to persist in this kind of new creation of America. But I just hope that there's a continual effort to talk about it and to make sure that it's not associated here. I say that because I recently went to Seattle, this past weekend, and it's one of my proposed destinations to live at, and I just was not enthused. I do a lot of comparisons between any place I go to, and I'll be traveling to a bunch of different places this summer, and I just wasn't, I just thought, Iowa City was better. And I know there's some Seattle people listening, and I just did. So
a lot of people in Seattle are listening right now.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, and if I lose some Facebook friends over it, it happens. But yeah, Iowa City's better. And so, speaking in which, where I think there's a lot of things that we have gotten from Seattle, and the focus on racial equity and just general equity. I just hope that, again, we are as pronounced as Seattle, because I'm not going to be moving there anytime soon. And I think Iowa City can do more in that respect, just based on our size and just based, again, on our community and population. And then last but not least, I'll do the Terry Dickens part about Summer of the Arts coming up this weekend. It's going to be exciting. There's going to be food, so I'll be there, and we'll go from there.
All right, good deal. Well, I'll bring this formal meeting pretty much to a close by mentioning several things. I had the opportunity to meet with 2 visitors from Tanzania about employment of people with disabilities. Maz, Kingsley, Ashley, and I toured the airport several days ago. That was fun.
Yes.
Pauline, Jeff, Ashley, Simon, and I met with Senator Bolcom to talk about the past legislative session. That was a pretty stimulating and informative discussion. I attended a meeting of the Refugee Alliance. I think they're making great progress in terms of getting a clear idea of what they want to accomplish as an alliance of people. Interviewed on KXIC with Jerry Lawler. I heard Jeff speak at the noon Rotary a few days ago about, 10 things you should know about Iowa City. Great job, Jeff.
Thank you.
Did really well.
Thank you.
And let's see, I attended the Affordable Housing Coalition's meeting. Sarah's still here. My God, you are still here. It was a well-executed meeting, as I said to you afterwards. The Crisis Center's Hunger Banquet is coming up. Has somebody mentioned that already?
Oh, I forgot about it.
Yeah, it's going to take place at the Radisson Hotel in Coralville on June the 7th. There's also going to be a Ragbri event on June the 8th at The View in the Hilton Garden Inn. And what else? Pride Parade, June 16th. Juneteenth celebration on June the 23rd, both of which Rock and I are going to have to miss. But lots happening. That's enough for me. Jeff?
Nothing.
Ashley? Eleanor? Kelly?
Only thing I want to mention, we had talked about the listening post at the last meeting, and the place did not really pan out at Coles Mobile Home Park, so Jim suggested the Washington Street Farmers Market on June 9th, which is a Saturday. I think Rockney said he is available. John's going to be out of town. Mazza will be gone.
Out of town.
Kingsley's out of town.
I think I can probably do it.
June 9.
Oh, just this one.
June 9th.
You said June 9th?
Yeah. June 9.
I thought the same thing, seriously.
Yeah, like next weekend.
Yeah.
Weekend from now.
What's the
Yeah, I
time?
can do that.
I cannot, so, yeah.
I can do it, yep.
Okay, Susan and Rockney?
I think they start at, is it 8?
Hey, how early do you want to get
The
there?
farmer's market starts at 7.
7
Oh,
o'clock.
what time do you want to do
Yeah, just
like
what
a...
time should we show up? and
7
how long should
o'clock.
we be
You
there?
want to do 9?
9, I'd say 9 would be good. We can always get there earlier.
Oh, come on, get there.
miss those
while-
people at 7,
while the
it's gonna be
sun's
upset.
rising.
Well, I mean,
2
hey,
hours or an hour and a half?
Hour and a half.
Hour and a half.
We can always
we
stay
can always
longer if
stay
we want
longer.
to,
Yeah, exactly.
All right, good deal. We got that fixed, right?
Yep.
Thank
Says
you.
everyone who's not even going to be there.
All right,
at 7.
we're pretty much at the end here. Could I have a motion to adjourn to the work session?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Botchway, seconded by Thomas. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned to the work session.